Good afternoon. It's a little bit past 1 o'clock, and I'd like to get started. Please take your seats. Welcome, everybody. This is the Senate Education Committee, and our first bill this afternoon is House Bill 1195. And the prime sponsor, I believe, is Representative, you are? Okay. Come up.
Thank you, Senator.
Welcome. Please go ahead, state your name.
My name is Tom Dolan. I'm happen to be the chair of the Municipal and County Government Committee in the House, and I'm also the prime sponsor of House Bill 1195.
Go ahead and present.
Thank you. As I look at the bill that you're considering, it's a little different than what was originally proposed in 1195. What we were really thinking, myself and the co-sponsors, were that any meeting at the municipal level that included public participation ought to include a period of public comment, whether it be planning board, school board, conservation committee, all those committees. And the real reason was to improve the communication efforts between citizens and their local government. And I believe as this particular bill matriculated through the process, it became a school board initiative and talked a lot about what was going on with school boards and the interchange with school boards and the public. And my recommendation is that I believe you ought to think about expanding that. I think the school board approach is not only important, but I'm thinking that it's too narrow. That the original proposal was all municipal meetings, which would include school boards, but all municipal meetings rather than just one of the entities, which happen to be school boards. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Prentice.
Good
Turn on
afternoon.
your microphone.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. So I'm going to make a statement, then ask a question, but it's really brief. I was a city council in Lebanon for 12 years. We always had public, and I do think, we're limited here, somewhat limited here, because this has come to us about schools. But this relates to our school board as well. We always had a public comment period up in the front for anything that wasn't already on the agenda. And then there were public, as we went through the agenda items, in specific, and there were public hearings, there was a set period of time. So it's just surprising to me that this has come up and has been talked about in a few different ways this year, because I know we heard a bill about from Londonderry, I think it was, related to this not too long ago.
I think it was Londonderry.
Yeah. What's the genesis? Like, what's the, I know that's like my own world of, the Upper Valley, but so it's here because there's a problem, correct? Just tell me a little bit about how you came to this point.
Sure.
Because my experience has been different, but I also am not all over the state.
I happen to be also spent 21 years that just ended last month, 21 years as a town councilor in Londonderry.
Okay,
So I bring a lot of experience as to meetings and public comment and so forth. I have found out through surveying some of my counterparts in the state's select boards and town councils that the periods of public comment that are offered are very inconsistent. Some towns do it, some towns don't. Some boards do it, some school boards do it, some others don't. But there's some mischief, if I may use that word, in public comment which really pushes against the original content of public comment. And that's where I found my counterparts in other towns were offering public comment, but they would do it in such a way that would limit public comment. So they would offer a public comment from 11 to 12 o'clock at night. If their meeting was going to go from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., they would put the public comment at the end. So I would ask, well, why are you doing that at the end of the meeting? I says, well, most people have gone home by then, and we won't have to deal with it. And in my view, that's not the purpose of public comment, and it certainly puts at jeopardy the relationship that the public has with its elected officials. So that's why in this particular bill, we said it should be at the beginning of every meeting. So they
No,
can't put it at the end.
All right, so,
Follow up?
just, I mean, I completely agree with you about access and public comment periods, and it is a public body, and they only have, there are only certain things that they can, these bodies, as you know from being a town councilor, can reflect on or talk about in non-public sessions. So again, it's just surprising me the way this has come up, and what I want to make sure is, whether it's a school board or a city council, that what we don't do at the state level has some unintended consequence locally. But I want you to know that in the spirit of this, like, that I agree. Like, so I'm just it's just surprising to me after all the years that we allowed, we did this at the beginning, we had public comment throughout. And sometimes we would limit it based on the number of people that were there. We'd say,
Sure.
can everybody stay to 3 minutes?
Right.
But
The way that we wrote the bill, original bill, was that the chairman of the board or committee, whatever was hearing, could limit the time that the person spoke in public comment, but couldn't limit the content or the topic that they spoke about.
Oh, actually, Senator Ricciardi will let her go, and I'll hold on, because she has experience in this area too, so I'm interested to hear what she.
Senator Ricciardi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you for your testimony. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Senator Prentice has said, because I've been a town councilor in my town, and I also have 14 towns in my district. And I have gone to all of them, and I have not had any issue in any of the select board, town councilors, or, alderman type. I may have heard some comments on the school board area, but I will tell you, we always have, after Pledge of Allegiance and roll call, the first thing we do is we ask if there's any, public comments, and we do limit it to 5 minutes. But then we also, as each item on the agenda is heard, we open to the public, and the public can come up and go to the microphone and again say how they feel. So I'm just don't want to take away local control at the state level, because I really feel like certain things should be in the hands of your town and municipality and try to work through them. So it's more of a comment, because I'm not seeing a problem where in my 14 towns.
Well, thank you. I would tend to agree that local control is very important. It's just that we have found that the good practice that you just described is not even across the state, and that's the purpose of this, was to make everybody level.
Thank you for taking my question.
Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Dolan, thanks for calling the bill to our attention, and your original bill, which I see was fairly brief and said was less onerous, said 15 minutes. Chair has some discretion over how long people talk, how long it occurs. Doesn't say when the meeting has to occur, but that's fine. Is it your suggestion that we go back to that original version?
Well,
And what would inhibit us from doing that? What was the headwind that you ran into in your committee?
going back to that original version, I think you're going to run up against those who have interest in limiting the amount of administrative control that the state wants to administer over the running of school boards. I think that you're probably going to hear from the School Board Association that there are certain things that they don't want to see us to get involved in, and it wasn't ever our intention to be involved in school issues, like especially students and things like that. That this was just a very general note that said, if we're going to engage with the public, we should do it around a set of rules, and everybody ought to do it, as opposed to, in some cases, the response would be, let me give you an example. If a local town was going to have it was going to entertain an ordinance around limiting the use of guns, the people would come out of the woodwork, and they'd be at those local town council or school or select board meetings. They'd be drowning in people that want to speak. And on those occasions, you're going to want to have some rules around who can speak and who can't speak, and to give everybody an equal opportunity. So in this particular case, where schools seem to have floated to the top of some of the legislation that you're looking at, it would be my suggestion to pull back from that a little bit and address it in a more general way, that schools would be included, but not necessarily the only subject, because it's not the only subject that's of concern. And I might suggest that the House and the Senate come together and look at a way to meld the two thoughts here.
Follow up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, do you think that a study committee, this gets turned into a study committee?
A study committee or some type of a conference where they get together and decide together what would be the right approach forward.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I have a comment.
Yes.
I've been both on the ZBA and the planning board, and we never had any problems. There are public hearings, and if people have something to say, they will show up. So we never had a problem, and I know the select board presently, they have a public comment period set aside. My only question is whether or not we should actually specify a certain time, because I think if you come in and have something to say, you can raise an issue in the beginning, but sometimes it's better to hear what some of the issues are that's being presented and then have a question and answer period. So, and the reason I think that the school board issue came up, because that has been a board where people have had a hard time. I know in my town, my husband was supposed to apply 2 weeks ahead of time in order to speak. You could not speak if you came on that date. So I think we've heard a lot of things like that, and that was the reason we essentially decided that the school board meetings was an issue, because that had been very difficult to raise issues, voice your opinion, and that's what this bill is.
Yes, I subsequently saw, after this legislation was drafted back last spring, almost a year ago.
Okay.
And since then, there's been a lot of news in the news media talking about CRT and other issues that are involved in the schools, and people flocking to their school boards to give their opinions. That was not the intent of the original legislation, to get in the middle of that discussion. So it's a matter of what comes up, what are the rules that apply to the boards. You certainly don't want, and this has been heard this past year, comments back to the members of the public. I'm sorry, you can't speak at this board. You're not on the agenda. Or I'm sorry, we're not taking any public comment tonight. And that, especially if people come and they're emotionally invested in what's happening, and they're denied the opportunity to even give some small number of, small opinion. In many places, there's no problem at all. And as you know, often we write legislation to clean up those areas that aren't following the generic template.
Any other questions from the members? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Christina?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Barrett Christina, New Hampshire School Boards Association. Thank you to the committee. I'm handing out Senate Bill 410 that this committee passed whenever that was ago, maybe a month or so ago, and then was adopted by the full House. Just as a point of information, Senate Bill 410 is being heard in House Education at 1:30. So my plan was to oppose 1195 as it's written, and then I was going to go up and support Senate Bill 410 in House Education. I spoke a little bit with Representative Dolan just prior to this hearing. Indeed, the original bill was any public body under RSA 91A was going to have a public comment period. Select boards, aldermen, village districts, whatever it might have been. But the amendment that came out is the bill in front of you. The reasons that we are opposing 1195 is we think it's kind of broad, to be honest with you. For example, on line 5, it says, the meeting has been opened and prior to the board addressing any substantive agenda issues. They're all substantive, and that's why they're on the agenda, and that's why the school board is going to be going through them. Also, this provision calls for a 1-hour public comment period, whereas Senate Bill 410 calls for 30 minutes. And the only rules in 1195 that would be allowed are for purposes of maintaining decorum. I think you recall when we were talking about Senate Bill 410, NHSBA posited some language and limiting it. You can limit public comments that touch on student privacy matters or staff privacy matters. If this body collectively, the New Hampshire legislature, is going to move forward with a bill directed solely at school boards and public comment periods, we think it's important to maintain and have provisions in the law that says, yes, the school board can preclude or prohibit public comments that touch on student privacy matters or staff privacy matters. So that's where NHSBA is on this. We oppose 1195. I'm going to run upstairs and support 410. Representative Dolan makes good points. If, presumably if we're going to have public comments in law, it should be, applicable to every public body. But, I certainly got the sense with Senator Carson's Bill 410 and then this coming out of the House that something was going to, some bill relative to public comment at school board meetings was going to come down and be law. So that's why I wanted to work with this committee on 410. So, that's my testimony. That's where NHSBA is on this particular matter, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Do you have time to answer questions?
The clock is behind me, so what do I have, about 5 or 10 minutes? No. No. It's 1:20. I've got about 7 or 8 minutes, if that's
Okay.
all right, Madam
Senator
Chair.
Khan.
Thank you. Were you aware that Representative Dolan's bill originally said a 15-minute period?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yes, I was looking through my notes. I don't recall specifically if NHSBA took a position on 1195 when it was introduced, but I know we had some objections to the. It was Representative Gordon's chair of House Judiciary. It was his amendment, so it came out unanimous. So, I don't recall NHSBA's initial position on 1195 as introduced, but we certainly object to the amendment and the version that came out of the House.
And I think that some of the conditions that you wrote into a emergency meeting and
Yep.
a meeting where confidential matters were
Non-public
the
session
exclusive,
meeting, correct.
item on the agenda, those are good improvements that I think you brought forward. Just getting you warmed up for the next testimony.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You have time to get up and get prepared. Anybody in the audience who has anything to add to 1195? Seeing none, that ends the hearing on 1195. Representative Cordelli supports the bill and does not want to speak. So we are going over to House Bill 1530. Let's see who the presenter is here. The sponsor is Representative Ford. Ford?
Representative Oliver Ford.
Oliver Ford? Got it. Representative Ford? Representative Ford?
Welcome, Representative Ford. We are taking up your bill 1530.
Yes, I'm sorry. I need to get to where I can speak and hear. So, would
Go
you?
ahead. Go ahead, state your
Okay.
name.
I sent everyone, and I trust it got through, a long explanation of how we got to this point. I emailed it, and I hope everyone got a copy, but I'll cover it briefly if
Okay.
it's helpful.
Good.
This started out as a bill to require the community colleges to offer bachelor's degrees. Now, I have a background in higher ed. I'm a university president. I've taught in 2 different community colleges. I have experience in this in my other life before I became a legislator. And I knew it to be a possibility, and I also knew that certain aspects of how we were doing it in New Hampshire weren't working together very well. So when I made the proposal, it was kind of like break an egg and then decide you're going to make an omelet. And as I learned more and more about the system here, I became convinced by my colleagues and by the people I was working with in the community college system that the way of doing this would be better accomplished if we tried to bring everyone together and work commonly toward a goal rather than try to separate them. And so that's what we did. We basically just stopped doing that, repurposed in a work committee, and sat down and came up with something that unified the universities and the state colleges and the community colleges. And that's what this bill that you're seeing is. It's not the original bill, which was to authorize community colleges to give bachelor's degrees. That's gone. That's why I wrote you the long, complicated letter, because it was a very complicated process. As it stands now, this is a bill that has been approved by all the possible participants, the university trustees, community college trustees, and the various faculty groups within or organizational structures are all aware of it. They know how they can implement it. It's far better than it began. I want to make a big point of that. It's a far better bill than it began, and it accomplishes more. It will help us address some of the issues of people not completing degrees. It will take, it is at the core of something that will be complete New Hampshire. A whole maneuver or a whole motion to get people to finish community college degrees and then continue for bachelor's degrees. And that's what this does. It creates pathways, defined, spelled-out pathway for at least the 30 most popular bachelor's degrees that people go into. And that's where it is now. And it has come to you at this point saying, basically, please ratify what we're determined to do. We need your approval, your go-ahead. And that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the members of the committee? Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can you tell us what the bill actually does as amended? Does it, when I'm reading this, I see general education and lower division major requirements. But in layman's terms, if anyone in the community college system in New Hampshire completes a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts associate degree, are all of those credits accepted at the university system of New
I
Hampshire?
think you mean the other way around is how I would explain it. If you complete an associate's degree anywhere in New Hampshire at that, it transfers and fulfills those requirements as part of a bachelor's degree.
Sorry, I said bachelor's, I meant associate of science or
Yeah.
associate. So anyone who completes that.
Everything is transferable.
Okay. I don't know what lower division major.
Lower division is 1 in 200 level, basically. They're things that you often, freshman English, basic math, et cetera. That's the category. It's before you get deeply into the major, it's those level of courses.
Thank you.
Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Ford, for the obvious work that you put into this to get it to this point. which I
Well, it was a
think-
learning experience, and that often requires more work.
The bill doesn't address a reverse transfer, and I can ask that of the community college system, that perhaps in completing an associate degree, perhaps a student might want to look back to their community college experience and apply some courses there to complete that degree. Do you anticipate that these discussions will lead to that as well?
I anticipate that once this reaches the implementation people, they will begin looking at those, and we will invite them to consider, what about if someone gets partway through a bachelor's degree but needs to stop out and wants to complete a associate's degree and then go back to doing the bachelor's at some future point when job or life or whatever circumstances make it possible for them, that should be, but they really should be quite fungible among them. And I don't see that any great resistance to that, because they're now beginning to think of it, of this is a process. So you can complete part of the process or some other part, and maybe at different points in your life.
And one more question. I noticed that the implementation date is 2024. Can you just give us, what do you expect to trigger the implementation date?
The implementation date was selected somewhat arbitrarily, just allowing enough time for the institutions to get together, work together, put together the actual curricula that they're talking about having available, the 30 specialized ones to facilitate people completing those degrees so people could begin to plan to complete those degree programs. The little parts like the reverse enrollment and that sort of thing, I think are just technicalities that have to be ironed out. I don't see, why would anyone object? There's nothing before, let me back up a step. Before, when it was much more, I'm being cautious about using the phrase siloed, but each of the systems were kind of set up so that you have a role here, you have a role there, and nobody stepped outside the bounds. I think they're now beginning to understand that what they're involved in is helping people enter a process and complete the various components of it, and however they have to do it, our job as educators, and I still consider myself one of those, is to facilitate that transition, whatever we have to do. My wife is working right now in a program, she's a former teacher, Ed Dean, and teacher prep person. She's now working with a group of people that is trying to get students in Manchester public schools into combined programs that will lead them into community college degrees in conjunction with that, and all about getting badges and various things like financial literacy. And they've enlisted a number of banks who are funding this, providing computers and providing money to put in a banking account for the students who complete that. And all that I see is just things that are going to work right into and with these kinds of things here. And so that it will make sense to people from the outside. Well, yeah, right now I've got a family crisis. I need to work full-time, so I need to do my school part-time, but I still want to keep going in this process. And the whole thrust of it is complete your degrees, complete your degrees. And it's everybody organized toward that objective. And so then, okay, how do we make this happen? And this is where we start.
Good idea, because when students don't complete their degree, there's debt and no credential to show for it.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Representative Ford. Chancellor Rubenstein. Welcome. Please
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
thank you very much, Senator Ward and members of the Senate Education Committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak about House Bill 1530. And let me start by thanking Representative Ford for authoring the bill and also Representative Ladd, who through the course of subcommittee with House Education helped shepherd the process. And as Representative Ford described, I think the language in the bill is perhaps pointing us in a better direction than perhaps the initial idea, and I think ultimately for the good of students and the state. I do have prepared remarks which we'll share, but just to make this a little bit more efficient, just highlight a few things. This is ultimately a bill about access and affordability to post-secondary education for students in this state. And in my written remarks, you'll see that I anchor this in Running Start, eStart, early college, initiatives that we have created to create pathways into post-secondary education for more of New Hampshire students, available through virtually any high school in the state. Two important outcomes of the current version of House Bill 1530. One is the focus that it comes from the community college system, identifying the programs. It allows us to identify programs that are important to students in each region of the state. Specific programs that if we looked simply at the largest programs in demand, we might miss important needs of a particular region. So it gives us the ability to identify community-based needs throughout the state that ultimately serve students in those regions and the state well. The other piece that I want to draw attention to is the language in the bill that describes optimizing utility and affordability. And I will say some of the questions that were directed to Representative Ford asked about details, and it's probably helpful that the legislation not be too drilled down, and the delegation of authority to the boards of the community college system and the university system that the legislature saw fit to invest in those boards allows us as responsible managers within those organizations to implement and develop. But in terms of our thinking about this, it's not simply upper division, lower division. It's not simply 60 credits and an associate's degree. The optimization really speaks to the opportunity for students to capitalize on as much education as they can receive through the community college system. In some cases, that could be, under some of our current programs, 70 or 80 credits. And in fact, the university systems, four-year institutions, typically allow up to 90 total credits in transfer. So optimization on affordability and utility really benefits our students significantly. And to the extent that we can build a bridge between Running Start, where many of these students will capitalize on much more affordable access to post-secondary education while still in high school, make full use of what we're able to deliver in the community college system, and then bridge to the university system, creates probably the ideal situation for students to make full use of what public education in New Hampshire can offer. So we think that this outcome, the bill allows for that outcome. The responsibility then falls to us to actually develop and implement the programs that will produce those results. One other statement I'd make in response to Senator Kahn's question about reverse transfer. Typically, reverse transfer works for students who leave the community college system without having earned the associate degree, transfers prematurely, if you will, to the university system. Under this bill, if it's implemented and carried out in the way that we think it could be, and if students see the real value in it, the likelihood that a student will arrive at the university system without already having that associate degree in hand will be relatively rare. But the possibility certainly exists, and by building these pathways, we'll have clear articulation of the requirements, so a student who does leave early will know what they need to take when they arrive at the university system campuses to fulfill remaining requirements that would be appropriate for that.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Chancellor, for taking my question. Just to follow up on Senator Kahn's question, I understood his question to be if somebody leaves the university system to go to the community college system? Is that what you were addressing?
Well, typically it moves in the other direction.
Right,
In
typically, yeah.
theory, a student who comes to the community college system having already enrolled in the university system can transfer those credits back and fit into a transfer degree. The concept of reverse transfer is typically applied to a student who leaves an associate degree granting institution without having completed the degree, makes use of classes they subsequently take to transfer back to receive the degree without having to re-enroll.
Thank you. Follow
You're
up?
welcome.
Follow up.
Okay, so just getting into the details of the bill, it says at least the 30 undergraduate majors for which the demand from students in the community college system is the highest. So what degree programs do you have that are not included in the 30 highest?
We offer over 150 different programs, although some of that's duplicated by similar programs offered at different colleges. The enrollments on most of those programs, once we get past the top 22 programs account for roughly half of the conferrals of degree that we've had in the last 10 years. So there's a fairly good concentration in just the top 20 programs. Extending to 30 will bring us down to the majority of programs. And when we get past that, we start to see enrollments that are small enough that the interest for bachelor's degree completion, again, you're going to be looking at 1 or 2 students a year. And those are probably things that are better figured out on a case-by-case basis rather than the work that will go into building these 30.
Follow up?
Follow up.
Can you give us an example of one of those degrees?
One of the low-enrolled degrees. And part of the problem is that they're at the far end of the bench, and in fact might not be appropriate. Phlebotomy would be an example of a certificate program with a relatively modest enrollment and not a clear pathway to an associate or bachelor's degree completion. So again, probably more we start to get into certificates than the degree programs.
Follow up. So,
Follow up.
sorry, but for the 30 degree programs, what would not be included for a degree? And maybe you can get back to us on that.
I'd prefer to get back to you
Okay.
than randomly.
Okay, and then follow up again, Madam Chair. What happens if a student starts a program, a degree program at the community college, and they are given clear and effective information and directions that specify curricular paths to a degree, and then they're not, by the time that they get their degree, they're not in the top 30? The degree is not in the top 30.
Well, part of this is that we're building these pathways, so we'll have a point in time, we'll identify those programs. And again, part of the reason that I described the importance of this being done by the colleges is that we'll have programs that are critical to those regions. So it's not necessarily going to be the same programs for every college. White Mountains' needs may be different than River Valley's in terms of the prioritized programs. But we'll know at the starting point that these are the programs, and a student who enters, enrolls while we're building those programs is a student that will know that that's the opportunity. And so it's not so much that a program will fall out. This won't be done as an annual thing. When I said earlier that the top 10 programs, top 20 programs, top 30 programs, there's a consistency that goes back more than a decade. Nursing, our single largest programs, general studies, liberal arts, that handful of programs that are just consistently top 5, top 10, top 20. So I don't think we're going to see volatility where a student risks falling out, and we won't build it and then shut it down.
Another follow-up?
Yeah. Why would a student that's getting, let's just say, nursing, because you mentioned it, degree in Berlin, not, and they have a clear pathway to go to the university system, not be on the same footing as somebody who's getting that same degree from the community college system in another campus? Why would that person not be eligible for that same pathway?
Well, as I said, that program already exists. We have 3+1 articulation between the community college system and the university system that's now, I think, in its 9th year through Granite State College. So that one's already secure.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. Perhaps you can give us an example of a program at one community college site that would have a clear pathway to go with an associate's degree to have those credits all accepted at university system, that you also have the same exact program in a different community college system location that does not have that same pathway.
Okay. Thank you for helping me find the lack of clarity in my earlier communication. We have certain programs that don't exist at all of our colleges, and so it may not be among the largest for the community college system, but it may be absolutely critical to a particular college. If it's a program that exists across multiple campuses, then you would expect to have comparable access.
Thank you.
So I apologize for the ambiguity of my earlier remarks.
Senator Khan, did you have something?
I do. I wanted to ask about affordability. It's something that's mentioned in this bill. The sponsor mentioned it as well. We know that the community college system is our most affordable option for students in the state if they're looking for higher education opportunities. What do you anticipate as the chancellor of the community college system in promoting this kind of effort to your students? What do you anticipate affordability to mean for the portion of the degree that students might want to achieve beyond the community college system?
Well, ideally, with a student making full use of Running Start, and that's a whole nother conversation we can have, but increasing access to Running Start in high schools, particularly if supported similar to the STEM scholarship for those courses, we can help students complete a year, in some cases up to 2 years, of a college degree while still in high school. I know Commissioner Edelblut is championing the Career Academy. We're working with them on that. We see opportunities for students, even outside of that framework, to complete the equivalent of a year or more of college. If they then take that education, come to us as our degree-seeking students in the community college system, as I said, not just to 60 credits in the end of what would be a basic associate degree, but to complete the full opportunities available that could be 70, 80, 90 credits, to have completed to the 3rd year, the end of 3 years of a bachelor's degree at a cost that could be half, essentially what 1 year of college would normally cost. So I guess I'd say you could potentially drop the cost of completing a college degree by 50% if you put those pieces together.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time.
Then we have Tom Cronin.
Chairman has to
Whatever, Representative Wad, go first.
Should we switch?
I'm fine with that.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Senator Ward, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rick Ladd. I come from Haverhill, New Hampshire. I represent Chair of House Education, but I'm also here today because I am a trustee with the University System, New Hampshire. And we're going through a number of issues. I had heard affordability talked about, accessibility. The other component is governance. We have a number of students, of course, come out of the 7 community college with an associate's or of science or arts degree, 2-year degree. Now, what we are trying to do is exactly what Don Burks, president of Plymouth State University, is doing now in conjunction with White Mountain Community. You come out of the community college system with a 2-year degree, you come in as a junior at Plymouth State. Now, there are articulation agreements which we have between the 2-year schools and the 4-year schools throughout this state. And there's many, many, many articulation agreements right now where you can get these credits transferred from one place to the other. When we looked at this bill initially, we looked at the state of Tennessee. And they have statutory law that says if you come out of school with a science, associate's in science or arts, you come in as a junior in the 4-year system. But there's a caveat to that as well. 60 hours will transfer, of which of those 60 hours, 41 go to general ed courses, and the other 19 are applied to your pre-major in your 4-year degree. Now, we have the same issue here in this state, where we have students which have come out of the 2-year system and wanted to go 2+2 to the 4-year system. All their credits have not necessarily transferred. And that's an affordability issue. We've had students say, hey, I spent this money, I spent this time, and my credits aren't transferring. Why aren't they transferring, was the question we asked. Well, there's a lot of issues. They transfer to a department like engineering on the 4-year degree level, and they are not the same course that we require for our basic in the 4-year program. So how do we overcome that? Well, we need to overcome it by course 101 in location A is the same as 101 in course location B. One of the issues which has come about since we've tackled as trustees these 2 major issues which we have, merger, how we're going to deal with the demographics, all the 7 different institutions at one end and the 4 on the other, or 3.5, and the academic centers. There's a lot of capital equipment out there, capital buildings, facilities, staffing. It's expensive, and our revenues are decreasing. Our demographics are decreasing. So how do we tie these two levels, these 2 systems closer together? One, we've learned that we are not all operating on the same software platforms. So to take 101 in this location and 101 in that situation, to ensure that the same competencies are in both, you need to have paralleling or similar type software programs. One of the issues which we've done as trustees, we've now have an interim chancellor for the 4-year system, which is President Jim Dean. One of his primary tasks is to look at the academic side with the other presidents of the university system and provosts and deans to ensure that we're moving on this path where we're not going to do, as Representative Ford said, silo everything. Everything's siloed without any ability to understand what this silo is providing and this what silo is providing, and are the competencies similar. We are moving in that direction, as we did with the merger of Granite State with University of New Hampshire, Manchester. That has given us and netted us huge gains in terms of marketing one institution, but also of taking the software program Granite State had and using that as a platform amongst the university system 4-year schools to allow us to move forward. So 101 in Plymouth State is the same as 101 in Keene or UNH. So we have that transferability. That's a primary goal which we have, and through the challenges we have as a university system, and working with Jim Dean now, we are moving in that direction. And this will not just necessarily give us that transferability between the 2 and the 4s, but amongst the 4s, which is an important step which we have. And the gain from all this is we're going to keep these students that come out of the 2-year system that can't get all those courses transferred to one of our 4-year schools. We'll keep them in this state rather than going out and finding a 4-year institution in Massachusetts or Maine or elsewhere. We want to keep these students here at home, get them into our 4-year system, and have them learn to stay in the state, work in the state, and get the skills necessary for the jobs in the state. So I won't go any further with it. This is nothing new that we're doing. We've been working towards this end, but this is now putting it in statutory language as it has with the merger. The governor proposed a merger, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago? We're working towards that end. We've done a lot on the level where Kathy Provencher is, dealing with automation in terms of accountability for purchasing and expenses and all that. We're doing the same thing with academics. And so we're working towards this. The gain from the whole thing will be our students and keeping students in the state. This is a good bill. It's a great first step. We are now up with the Tennessees of the world, which are automatically doing that. We want to keep our kids at home. Thank you.
Questions?
Good. Go upstairs.
I guess you don't have any questions. You
That's
can
wonderful. Thank you.
continue stuff upstairs. Now, Mr. Cronin. Thank you for being so gracious.
Of course. Well, one is a chancellor, one is a trustee. I think it's very clear where I fall on that totem pole, so I'm happy to speak when it's my turn. For the record, Tom Cronin, Executive Director of Government Relations for the university system. In the interest of time, I have written testimony that I'm happy to share with Ava and the committee. I think I would simply reiterate most of the points from Chancellor Rubenstein, Representative Ladd. The university system was grateful for the opportunity to work on this legislation in collaboration with Representative Ford, Representative Ladd, and the community college system, and we are certainly in support. Over the years, we have worked diligently, I think, through programs like dual admission, the simplified transfer application, and really the hundreds of articulation agreements that already exist between our systems to ensure students have a pathway from the community college system to the university system. We fully agree with the intent of this legislation, that it is our responsibility to provide clear and effective information to students who are seeking to pursue a bachelor's degree in the state, and we believe this legislation is the next step along that path and are happy to support it and look forward to implementing it over the next couple of years. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
It's too easy. Thank you.
Anybody in the audience who likes to speak to this bill? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1530. Our next bill is House Bill 1594. And the prime sponsor, let's find it here. Mr. Page, Representative Page. Welcome, you can get started.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Is that on now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Thanks for allowing me to testify here. I'm the prime sponsor of 1594. This is a pretty straightforward bill. It kind of speaks for itself. By way of background, it passed the Education Committee, put on the consent calendar and was through the consent calendar 2 weeks ago through the House. So it's a bipartisan bill. What the bill does is it basically uses pre-existing kind of frameworks with special education and students with disabilities to have discussions as students are transitioning out of schools, public school students with disabilities are transitioning out of schools. And part of that transition process through the IEP process is setting goals, talking about what the student's going to be doing when they leave public schools. And what this bill does is wraps in a conversation about whether or not registering to vote would be an appropriate goal for the child. And then if it is, to make a plan to do so. Part of the driver of the bill, we hear as a parent myself, but also parents in my district and legislators and students, we're all concerned, I think, about how our students are actively engaged once they leave in civic life, not just as economic citizens, but democratic citizens, little d, in their public participation. So part of that conversation seemed a natural fitting point to tap into the framework that exists right now for students to leave public schools through the transition services, and that process that's ongoing through the IEP process and through Section 504 planning to embed this conversation. I think we all know the importance of voting. It's certainly important in the sense that it has a lot of spillover benefits. People who are registered to vote, who are voting, are actively engaged in their community. They're political participants, not just in politics, but also in civic groups and things like that. So there's a tremendous amount of spillover benefit for having that conversation. It's really, what this bill does is kind of gives, in my view, a high reward, low cost, or no cost. There's really no cost associated with having kind of this conversation and potentially making a plan for a student to register to vote and enjoy those benefits of being a registered voter and an active participant in our society. And I think that when we think about students with disabilities in particular who have had to overcome obstacles through schooling, the big question, of course, is after we've had a special education through K through 12 and they graduate, we want to make sure that we get students that, the whole point is to prepare them for life after school as an engaged citizen. So this is just one lever to tap an existing framework that will do that. I think it's worth noting that there's a significance in the message just that conversation, I think, would have with respect to a child at the IEP table in terms of empowering that student. It gives the student a sense of not only do they have rights, but they have responsibilities, and that their voice can and will be heard through voting, through getting actively engaged. So I don't want to understate the substantive value of even that conversation, I think, for a student who's leaving K-12 schools and going into the real world, if you will. So as I said, it speaks for itself in terms of its content, but I'm happy to take questions. And thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks for bringing forward this bill, Representative.
Thanks.
I think you're making a good point. I just want to ask you, relative to line 7, whether voter registration is an appropriate goal, and I assume goal substitutes for the word competency. But is there ever a point at which that's not something to be discussed?
I mean, in my view, the great weight would be no, but there may be some situation that the team would have knowledge of that may be pertinent to inform them on whether or not that whether voter registration would be appropriate in that circumstance, in the child's circumstance. So that's kind of why there's some flexibility with the team to sort of determine. I think, I mean, in the great majority, supermajority of cases, that it would be, in my view, an appropriate goal, but there may be one outlier or so out of 100 or whatever, a million, in my view.
You've got the bill in front of you. And
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If I might, Madam Chair. if line 7 said, the team shall discuss voter registration, dropping the word whether, the team shall discuss voter registration as an appropriate community living citizenship competency to be included in the IEP. Does that maintain the same meaning without?
If we're driving at goal, then I think,
Actually, it's driving at the word whether.
yeah. Well, you'd change from goal to competency, is that what you're suggesting?
I mean, yes, I think that's a 6 of 1, half dozen of
Uh-huh.
another probably, but it's more, the team shall discuss, without a predisposition as to whether or not to discuss it, the team will discuss voter registration as an appropriate goal.
I think at the end of the day, that's still, the team then could discuss, have that same conversation, and maybe it fundamentally wouldn't change. We could get rid of that word if that's the weather, and I don't think it would change, in my view. Others may have different opinions about it, but the substantive conversation that this is asking to have happen. So I hope that answers your question. Thank
Yeah,
you.
We agree with each other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Senator Khan, I have to ask you, what, you wanted to change shall to will on page 6?
No, I don't. That's not the word, but it would say shall discuss voter registration as an appropriate living citizenship competency to be included in the 504.
Did you get that?
So,
We've got some other people here that,
Okay, and no other questions that I see? Thank you very much.
thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
Senator, I have the bill in front of me now, so what were you suggesting, just so I can note it for Senator Ford?
Well,
the team shall discuss voter registration as an appropriate community living citizenship competency to be included in the IEP.
So we're just striking the word whether, right, on 7? Team shall discuss voter registration is an appropriate.
as appropriate, not as
an
appropriate.
community living citizenship competency.
I'm just, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out, I don't know that that wording is any better than what's already in the bill, because, as the representative said, they shall discuss it, but in certain circumstances, it may not be included in the IEP. So are you getting at, it should always be included in the IEP?
Should also always be a consideration.
I think that the word shall
Shall.
is there, shall discuss. Shall discuss whether voter registration is appropriate community living citizenship training goal to be included in the IEP or section 504 plan.
We can discuss it later, and others have heard that,
Yeah, we
maybe there are
can.
other testimony.
Discuss that later on. Liz Santarelli. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Ward and committee. There we go. Thank you. My name is Liz Tentarelli. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of New Hampshire. We are a nonpartisan group, and our mission includes empowering voters. So this bill is right up our alley. As many of you know, the group least likely to vote is young people, the 18 to 30-year-old group. But that has been growing in recent years. It went up by 4% in the 2020 election. So there are hopeful signs. But it's hard to reach young people. We have trouble reaching young people, perfectly typical students. It's even harder to reach students with disabilities. For instance, they may have no way of knowing that there are voting machines and adaptations designed for those with low vision, if that is their disability. They may not know that polling places are ADA accessible, and if in a small town, for some reason they're not, that they can vote from their car in the parking lot. And they may not know that they are allowed to have assistance in order to fill out the ballot in the voting booth. So this bill tackles that problem of helping students and their parents understand that they can take an active part in electing our government officials, because it calls for specific plans to be included in the IEP so that students will know how to register, what documents they need in order to register. For instance, one thing they need is an ID, and they probably have a student ID card. They probably have very little to prove where they live. So trying to explain this to the students on an individual basis, if there are disability issues, that's a very important thing to do. If they don't have a driver's license, and we know that there are many 18-year-olds who don't have driver's licenses just for economic reasons. Many of these students may not for the same reason or because of disabilities, but the IEP can make clear and have a clear plan for getting to the town clerk to fill out the form, to take to the DMV, to get the non-driver photo ID that they will need at the polls. So the League of Women Voters New Hampshire and I urge this committee to recommend this bill ought to pass as a way of fostering young people's participation in government in a very positive way, I think. And I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tim Kerner. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Ward and members of the Senate Education Committee. For the record, my name is Timothy McKernan. I am the Director of Policy and Advocacy for ABLE New Hampshire. We're a statewide disability advocacy organization. And ABLE stands for Advocates Building Lasting Equality. And this bill is very close to our mission of ensuring that people with disabilities have the same opportunities to participate in a full civic life, just like everyone else. I've submitted testimony making some points about the drawbacks to disability education in the public school system. You're often separated from your peers. I had an IEP, my daughter has an IEP, and it's the intent that these services are pushed into the classroom, but often that's not possible. So many students are taken out of the classroom, so they don't have the same opportunities for a civics education. They don't have the same opportunities to be with their peers. And many individuals with disabilities may not feel that they're welcomed to interact in civic society as a full adult. And I feel that this bill also is very efficient in that it does not require an additional salary for someone. It's part of the IEP process. Many different goals can be discussed during the IEP process, and this is a really good way to start that conversation for the student and for their parents, and to hold the schools accountable to looking at these students as a full person, just like everyone else, and they should have the same opportunities. I've submitted my testimony, and I'm prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? I don't see one. Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. And with reading through the bill, being a parent of a child with an IEP, do you see any language that needs to be adjusted to make sure that the topic is discussed in that process?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I had not thought of it until today when Senator Khan brought up the question of the word whether. And the word whether does interject the possibility that that just shouldn't be discussed at all. I think that the bill with the present language would still be adequate, but it would be strengthened, I feel, by striking whether and making it clear that this is something that Every 18-year-old adult in New Hampshire has the right to vote. And if they have not been, if there's not an extenuating circumstance whereby they've lost their right to vote, then they should have that right, just like everyone else. And I think that that should be the expectation.
What's that? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Linda Bundy? Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Education Committee. My name is Linda Bundy, and I live in Antrim. Over the course of my years as an educator, I saw many changes as special education has evolved. For 12 years, I worked as a paraprofessional, supporting children with a variety of needs. During the first 5 years, our students' academics took place in a portable building that was their home base. They joined peer classmates only for music, art, physical education, and recess. Over the following 7 years, the model changed so that the students began their days with their classmates and were provided more educational support in the classroom. The separate building became a resource center for small group or individual work. At that point, I earned my teaching credential and spent the next 16 years as a classroom teacher. The inclusion of students with special needs in the classroom and in all aspects of school life continued to grow. I collaborated with special educators, therapists, and other service providers so that they knew the current topics and activities in the classroom and could provide support there. Often they would work with a group in class, occasionally even teaching the whole class. The preparation meant more planning time for us adults, but the result for the students was a community of learners where everyone was an active member. Because of my experience, it makes perfect sense to include planning for voter registration for students who are 17 years of age or older. During their school years, we work to facilitate their full participation. As we prepare them to graduate into the world beyond the school, an important part of that should be teaching them how to fully participate as active citizens in their communities. I ask for your support of HB 1594. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. Karen Rosenberg.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Rosenberg. I'm with the Disability Rights Center. I'm the new policy director, and prior to that, I spent about 16 years representing students in IEP meetings and doing special ed work in addition to some of my other work. I'm here to voice my support for 1594. I think that it's a really nice bill in that it has a great goal, having students really address civic engagement as part of their transition to adulthood and to help them to facilitate that and make that happen through voter registration when it's appropriate, which probably is in almost every case. So I know you asked some questions about the drafting. There are no perfect bills, I don't think. I think this one does accomplish what it sets out to do. If you wanted to tinker with it a bit, I think, Senator Khan, what you were getting at was that voter registration is something that most of the time, if not all the time, should be considered. And so removing the whether, as you suggested, would accomplish that by making it very clear that this is always going to be a discussion for kids with disabilities. We're always going to consider whether. We're not going to consider whether. We're always going to consider voter registration as an aspect of adult and community living that's important. So that could be done. I think that I would encourage you to retain the word goal, because IEPs especially talk about goals in those IEP plans. Senator Hennessy, I think is your child a transitioning child, like 14 and up? Once they are at that age, then you'll notice there's a section in the IEP that talks about transition goals and services and who's going to assist with those services, so it makes sense to retain goals. You could add the word competency, or it could be goals or competencies for students who have 504 plans who may not have goals, but they are working on certain competencies. That may be something to consider if you wanted to really be broad about it, but it's a really nice bill, and it helps our students to become hopefully productive, engaged adults, and eventually maybe even move into the position that you all are in when they are ready to do that. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? I don't see one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have Sue Mullen. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice to see you again. I appreciate your taking my testimony this afternoon. I'm Sue Mullen. I represent Hillsborough District 7, the town of Bedford. I spent 40 years of my professional life as a student advocate, and 10 of those years I was the co-director of Special Olympics in Bedford, New Hampshire. And I want to say that I think that this is probably my favorite bill of co-sponsorship because having listened to parents and kids talk about feeling easily underestimated, the idea that we would not only plan for a discussion, but also make students aware of the accommodations that are available and help them plan how to exercise their civic responsibility is very exciting to me. When Representative Page first called me and floated this idea by me, I said to him two things. One, this is a brilliant idea, and two, I'm a little sorry I didn't think of it myself. So I would encourage you to support this, and if I can be of any assistance in answering questions, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody in the audience who would like to say something? I know we have Linda Tanner, who supports the bill but does not want to speak. And Representative Ladd is busy upstairs. So anybody in the audience? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1594. Yeah, I saw that. We're going to continue with House Bill 1626, relative to the unique pupil identification system. And I guess Representative Cordelli is the prime sponsor.
I am. Thank you very much, Chair Ward and committee members. Good to see you. I am here to introduce House Bill 1626. And for the record, I am Glenn Cordelli, representing Tufton Borough, Moulton Borough, and Sandwich in the beautiful Lakes region. This legislation is the result of the department contacting me in the fall and pointing out that there are a few maybe holes in our legislation in this area of the statutes. Based on practice and also other legislation that has been passed, so that this section really needed to be updated. The unique pupil identification number, or SACID, is already part of the process when it comes to not just regular public schools, but also public charter schools to keep track of individuals. And with the passage of the education freedom accounts, it is part of that legislation so that the department can make sure that there is no duplication of payments for individuals, so that we don't have a student being registered in the education freedom account program as well as in a public school or a charter public school. So it's important to avoid duplication, and that is the reason that it was felt that we needed to update this statute. We continue to have discussions with the department about the use of unique pupil identification and the use of that number as an ongoing discussion as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know the department is right behind me and very anxious to testify.
Any questions? Senator Khan, did you have a question for Representative Cordelli?
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Representative. I'd like to just have you look at on page 3, line 28P. I know you weren't anticipating answering this question, but I do know that you are an advocate for homeschooling EFAs, the options that this bill tries to maintain. My question is, the department can answer this one too. Is there any instance in which a unique identifier should not be required of a student? Meaning, we're trying to track student progress, grade level, movement through appropriate age level, maybe higher education. And I mean, this is, it's kind of a basic data element to have to be able, otherwise we wind up using partial data sets and always questioning, gee, if they went to a school, we'd have an identifier. They didn't go to a school, they had a different kind of education. Now we don't have an identifier. So we'll always be questioning, do we have sufficient data for homeschooling to actually evaluate it against all the other kinds of schooling that we have where we do have it? Your opinion on that?
I do. I would not want to see the unique pupil identification assigned to homeschool student. I personally believe that home education has the best form of accountability, and they have parental accountability. And parents are free to choose other options, whether it be homeschooling, tax credit scholarships, or whatever, if they feel that their child is not making satisfactory process. So I would not be in favor of having homeschool children become part of the system when it comes to assignment of a SACID or unique identifier.
Senator Hennessy.
I have a question, just to the intent. So if a homeschool student goes to, thank you, Madam Chair, goes to a high school for a certain course, and the high school needs to be reimbursed by the department for that course, are they allowed to opt out for a number in that situation?
I believe so, but probably the department can answer that better than I.
I'll ask them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We could listen to Linda Tanner, who wants to speak, And then at the end, we'll have Caitlin Davis tell us all about the unique identifier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you again. For the record, I'm Linda Tanner. I'm representative Sullivan County, District 9, and I represent the towns of Plainfield, Cornish, Grantham, Croydon, Newport, Sunapee, Springfield, and Unity. And this is truly a bipartisan bill because actually I came over the summer when I was thinking of bills to bring forward. One of my concerns has been, and continues to be, with the eligibility and accountability with all the alternative and education freedom accounts we have and the tax credit accounts, and homeschoolers that go to regular schools for picking up chemistry classes and things like that. How were we tracking them? How can we ever get the data on accountability, academic accountability, financial accountability, residency, all those things, unless we had some way to track them? And so I looked in that nice yellow book that I hope you'll vote for, the law book, and to look up the different areas of how accountability is done. And it was through this unique pupil identifier, which I'd always heard SACID, but I didn't make the connection. So I put in a bill almost exactly the same as Representative Cordelli's from the Department of Education with a few changes, and we decided to just go with his and with some changes that needed to be made. But basically, by doing this and by extending it to these other groups, and again, it's to public school students, charter school students, and now students that will be in the EFA program, and also, I believe, the educational tax credit program. And I think you'll hear from the department, maybe a couple of others, that they would like to include with that. We'll have data collection that we can actually see in an anonymous way without protecting the privacy of pupils. We can get assessment results. We can aggregate assessment results. We know we can get results on who's involved in the program and their age, and also determine when they actually age out of the program or move out of state, that sort of thing. So I thought this was a really good issue and something that was very needed. And I'm so glad that it came through, and I hope that you will support it. And the department's here to tell you some more about it, I'm sure.
Thank you. Any questions for Representative Tanner? I don't see one.
Thank you
Thank you
very
very much. Caitlin Davis. I know.
I'm bragging about having it.
Should we start reading, opening up?
I can. Let's see what is on page 1. I'm curious. There's a lot of index in this book. Talks about the state and their government. Yes, 21N. Yes. Good afternoon from the Department of Education. I am Caitlin Davis. I am a director that oversees many things. One of the things I oversee is implementation of the state longitudinal data system and our data collection operations that comply with state and federal laws. As both Representative Tanner and Representative Cordelli have stated prior, the Department of Education actually approached Representative Cordelli relative to introducing this bill to clarify the use of unique student identifiers, or SACID numbers, for use in the EFA programs. And simultaneously, while we were looking to do that, we noticed that charter schools were not included in the current law, and we do currently use SACID number for charter schools children. So we wanted to adjust the law to include those new categories of students. As Representative Tanner just alluded to, the department would actually like to amend the bill going forward to include adult education centers as well for the purposes of accountability. We noticed in a very timely manner in a meeting this morning that adult education was not included in this, and that is needed for participation. So I will get that information to the committee following this meeting. I will take any questions that you might have about the use of the unique student identifier, how we use it as a department, or anything.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director. So the question that I asked the Representative Cordelli, so if a homeschool student participates in the public school for, say, chemistry, are they allowed to opt out based on this legislation?
We do require SASD numbers for participation in any sort of coursework if a school is going to submit for reimbursement for that child. Now, a school district may opt the child out individually, but the school district cannot be reimbursed for that coursework. If the homeschool child is participating and does not opt out, and the school district requests the money for adequacy for that child, the information is not used for any other purposes. There's no accountability or assessment information that's maintained on that child. It's only used for the purpose of paying adequacy.
Follow-up?
Follow-up.
What about the instances where the homeschool student may participate in a college-level course through the high school Running Start, say?
So all coursework that's being offered through the high school would be eligible for participation or to receive adequacy, so that would be included in those numbers.
So not, follow-up?
Follow-up.
Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So if it's a community college level course where the community college system would get reimbursed at half of the actual cost of that course, does any language in here affect that payment?
I don't believe so. However, I'm not familiar with how the reimbursement works between the school districts and the community college system. So I'm only talking about for the purpose of adequacy. That is a direct payment from the community college system to the school district. So I can't answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Khan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. In the instance of a homeschooler, the decision about whether to enroll in a course in the school, the reimbursement to the school is through the parent, right?
For the purpose of a homeschooler, yes, but not through for the purpose of an EFA, the reimbursement would go from the EFA scholarship organization to the school district, not to the parent. For a homeschooler, just a regular homeschooler that's not participating in an EFA, the money would go from the Department of Education to the school district. The parent would not be receiving the money directly. So in each instances, the money is either going from the department to the school district or the EFA scholarship organization to the school district.
If I'm wanting to understand it. If I'm a parent with a EFA for my child, and I have the $4,000, and I decide that one of the expenses is going to be to enroll in that chemistry class. Who is paying the school for the chemistry class?
The scholarship organization. So,
Directly?
directly.
Is that a discount on my $4,000?
It would be charged against your EFA account, yes.
So it is against the EFA account.
Yeah, against the EFA account, but the money does not go to the parent. So the scholarship organization makes the payment directly to the schools. The EFA law requires that the scholarship organization, to the extent possible, make sure that no payments are directly reimbursable to the parents, rather that payments are provided to the service providers directly.
Okay. Still in the account. So, I mean, the SACID is designed to have absolute privacy. There's no personally identifiable information through the use of that number, unless you have privilege to access. Tell us what kind of access does somebody have if they have access to a SACID?
So at the Department of Education, SACID numbers are never maintained with with names. So you would have a SASN number and you would have the information associated with the SASN number, but you would never have a name associated with that. So we would not be able to do direct tracking back at the Department of Education. I'm unclear about additional questions you have.
I guess that's sufficient for, you know, the desire to be able to see if our educational outcomes are, is there anything that we can track about home educated students and the educational outcomes and persistence through various education experiences, including higher education, by virtue of having that on each homeschool student.
So that would be an adjustment that would need to be made in the law. The Department of Education doesn't maintain any identifiable information on homeschool kids right now, including SASA numbers. So we just maintain that a child has registered for homeschool and we count that as a number, but we do not track that child in our databases at all. So unless they are participating in a coursework at a high school, and that would only be relative to the adequate education funding. There would be no accountability, no participation, say, in civics education that's required or required for graduation. None of that information is maintained on homeschoolers right now by the department.
Or a PSAT, or a,
None of that information, no.
or even
The Department of Education doesn't have access to assessment information except for the assessment that we're implementing, which is a SAT at the high school level and SAS at the elementary school level. But we don't have information, say, on iReady or PSAT or ACT or other assessments that kids are participating in. And that goes for all kids, whether they're homeschool or public school children.
what's the disadvantage of not collecting this information?
The Department of Education would not be able to see if there's duplicative payments. So this is the only unique identifier that we're using at the department. We do not collect social security numbers or any other unique identifier. So without being able to use the SASN number for this purpose, we would not be able to see if a child were, for example, enrolled in a public school full-time and also have requested an EFA full-time. We right now, on a very regular basis, we have so we collect all of the information from the schools across the state twice a year, at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. During that time, we run anomaly reports, and we very regularly find kids that have overlapping times within different schools. We call that report a student too busy report. This is a function of just overlapping days in our system. If you remember, we collect information right down to the half day of enrollment. So if a child were to attend Concord High School one day and then Hopkinton High School in the afternoon, we would be able to tell that. So when we do our data collection in the fall and at the end of the year, there's very frequently kids that come up that have overlapping time, which would mean if you were to just leave it that way, we would be paying adequacy at 1.2%, or sorry, 102% of adequacy rather than just the per student basis amount. So what we do is we calculate what the ADM for that child is, which should never exceed 1 because 1 is during the time of the year, and we appropriately prorate the school district that is the child is going to school for that time. That would be the same for the EFAs now or charter schools.
But not for homeschool students?
Not for homeschool, no, unless the law is adjusted. We also don't pay adequacy except for that one course side of things for homeschool kids. The only adequacy quote that's going out the door would be that 0.15 of an ADM, assuming that there is appropriation in the state budget in that applicable year.
That's a hole then in what we have here. That's a.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, that's a different subject. So the hole, I think, is an intentional hole right now based on the way that the legislation reads. I believe that charter school kids are intentionally not required to have SASSA numbers per past legislators.
Charter school.
Charter school, homeschool kids, yes, are intentionally left out from the law. So
that's a hole in the tracking and relative to assuring us that there's no overlap.
it's an intentional set of the data that is not being tracked by the department.
So we can't track if there's more than one.
We cannot track unless the law is changed.
Okay.
I have a question. Probably so low on the thing here. How do the students get this unique number? Now, what do you do?
Yeah, so each year, usually in the fall or the late summer, school districts reach out to the Department of Education and request a SASSA number for that student, and we have an automatic number generator that generates a SASSA number that we give back to the school district. And then we use that information throughout the educational life of the child to track information that's required in state and federal laws. So that information may be demographic information, as we're required to report demographic information. As soon as the student becomes, it enters third grade and they start participating in the assessment, we may be using it for assessment purposes. We would be using it for accountability purposes. And probably the most important thing to the state of New Hampshire, as far as at least funding is we use it for paying adequacy. We use adequacy as paid on a student identifiable, student adequacy is paid by the SASSA number, meaning we don't use aggregate numbers that are reported by the school district. We take the individual student enrollments and we count them up and do the calculations and make those payments.
Okay, I'm ahead of that. So the school district will give you the names of the children?
Correct.
Anything else?
They give us the name, the date of birth, and the town that they were born for generation of the SASSA number. And then throughout the year, each year, a school district will have to give us the town that the child is a resident in, so we can appropriately pay adequacy. And the school districts have the ability to move a child around throughout our system. So they'll say, they left this town and they enrolled in this other town, or they're attending this school and they left this school.
So with that information, you just randomly generate numbers for the children?
Correct.
And that's the only thing that you keep, right?
So we have a matching database, but it's not maintained in the same manner. It's completely off out of our student information system. So our student information system in Data Warehouse only maintains information by SASSA numbers.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I'm seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A lot of numbers to keep a track of. Anybody in the audience who has something to add? If not, this is the end of the public hearing on House Bill 1626. And we're going to go into executive session. Don't have a vote to go into executive. We can't, well. How much longer is?
I will text Sue.
Between yesterday and today, it'll keep you busy.
Yes, right. Yeah. Good. Well, you do a great job.
Thank you very much. Great, Cynthia? Yes. Awesome. I'll let Senator Ward know. Thank you.
I've never been so wanted to show up somewhere, sorry.
Move executive session.
I'll second that.
And community college system.
I have a lot of comments on this one.
I only have two.
I know we heard a lot of testimony from different areas, and a lot of support for that. Does anybody have any concerns about it, something that you have discovered? Okay. Senator Prentice, you're over there.
I'll defer to Senator Hennessy first. I only have 2 items. She might have more.
Can I go?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first of all, yes, we heard a lot of testimony on this. I think everyone was in favor. I imagine the committee is all in favor. But I just want to work on the nitty-gritty of the wording, because I think the wording of the bill actually needs help. And I think that there's so much help that's needed that there needs to be an amendment, and I would rather discuss them with you guys before
Okay.
making an amendment that doesn't work for the committee. First being on page 1, lines 23 through 25. This is a policy statement that I'm not quite sure is needed, but also I'm not quite sure is defined what equitable access is. So if the rest of the bill is going to say what the military students are given for supports in New Hampshire, I don't know that this section 110E2 is needed. Does that make sense? I do. Okay.
So that's your question,
Is it needed? I don't think it's needed, but someone might point to equitable access and say that's not equitable because where I came.
Equal, not equitable.
No, it says equitable access.
And yours?
Yeah.
23 and 24?
Line 24, the first word, equitable.
Right here.
Oh, there it says, okay, from 24, okay.
Are we talking about the same bill?
I think so.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're on 53, not 63.
Okay.
53.
53.
53, yeah.
So just so
You want to eliminate that?
I would love to eliminate that section.
From beginning on line 23.
Yep, through 25. On page 2, the section that talks about the supports that a military-connected student should get when a parent or guardian is called to active duty. I fully am committed to this support. I just think that we need to reword it. And I also have a question,
Which lines are you, they talking about? the top?
beginning of page 2.
Okay.
1 through 14, 1 through 15. It talks about shall provide the student and parent or guardian with the following. In any other circumstances, are our school systems responsible for providing parents or guardians with school counselors, school psychologists, social workers, home and school visitors?
So we ask.
Okay. So, in a few different lines in here, it talks about the supports that we will provide to the parent or guardian in addition to the student. I just want to make it clear that we're providing the supports to the student, perhaps at the request or permission of the parent or guardian and to the parent or guardian. But also, I don't know that every school district has access to if you look at line 7 through 11, does every school district have access to a certified school counselor, a certified school psychologist, school social workers, plural, and certified home and school visitors, plural?
Seems like a lot.
Yeah, so I don't know how we would fix that to say one of the following, because I don't know one of the following might not work for that student. I don't know what the correct wording would be for that.
May provide, go ahead.
We might have some words.
Stuck up. Becky Wilson from the School Boards Association. Just some, narrative data from having worked in many schools. Typically, schools will have access to support services within their staff, specifically what the titles are or specifically what certification those people carry might change from district to district. So you might be able to try to craft some wording in regards to, access to support services or school counseling services as appropriate or as available to all students. I think it's correct that not every school employs a school social worker, for example, but every school that is accredited does have to have access to a certain counseling services and things like that per the number of students that they have in their building and in their district. So they would have access to something.
Would you say counseling service or other services as appropriate?
I think that would be reasonable wording.
Or alternatively, access to either. And then the colon.
I would, also defer to the department.
Any of the above, any of the below.
Yeah, I would defer to the department, but I think what the intention from what your conversation is seems to be access to a licensed Department of Ed, support service. And those, every district, to some extent, would have access to a school psychologist or a psychologist or a counselor or a school social worker.
But we don't have to spell them out.
Right. Okay.
Attorney Fenton, is that right?
Yeah,
I agree, and I would put in the word if available.
That's
But school districts do have access to general groups.
I don't think that's optional. I think schools have to provide a school counselor.
If you enumerate it, the particulars of it might not be available, so if you put it into generalized.
Yeah, access to either a licensed and then list the license, and it ought to say licensed too.
I wouldn't actually include either because that might make it seem like they have a choice. I would say access to licensed counseling services. or some, what was it? And then again, on line 15, deleting parent or guardian. I had some concerns on page 3. Lines 25 and 26. And this has to do with if somebody moves into town, them trying to find a school district that was very similar to what they came from. But I reached out to the School Board Association, and they didn't have concerns with this, and maybe they can speak to that.
Thank you again, Becky Wilson from the School Boards Association. We appreciate Senator Hennessy reaching out. We certainly understand the situation that dependents of military service personnel are under when they are in that situation, and we would certainly support trying to work with that family for enrollment in a school district that is appropriate for the student. I do think there's some wording in the bill, and I'll have to find the specific line in regards to it's at the ability of the school district that they are requesting to have accept that placement. So I think as long as that wording remains in the bill, that would be fine, and we would certainly support that language.
Okay, which word is that? That you want up there?
So this, it right now says regardless of the capacity of the district.
It does, but then on line 33 on page 3, a school district of residence shall not prohibit the transfer, et cetera, to which the parent of the pupil applies, approves the application for transfer, if the school district to which the parent applies approves the application of transfer.
So could we delete the lines regardless of the capacity of the district, and then the intent would still be the same?
I believe so. I mean, I think the reason a school district would not approve a transfer could be capacity. It could be other, whatever the reasoning potentially could be many different reasons. But I think that as long as there's the wording in there that the school district that they're applying to has the ability to decline that if there were a specific reason to do so, that would be fine.
So we're deleting regardless
Yeah, I would say
of
that
the
because
capacity of this.
page 3 line starts at the end of line 25 through 26, or through part of 26, regardless of the capacity of the district. Yeah.
I believe that the word capacity there was really meant in terms of enrollment numbers, not necessarily capacity in the way that maybe other people might interpret that. So I think that it's confusing wording. It would make it would be much cleaner to just remove that specific.
And I do want to point out that Christopher Arnold had provided some alternative language about within 50 miles of the parent's duty station. But if your association doesn't have issues with the language as written, I don't want to nickel and dime the mileage that.
We don't have concern about it. Our belief is that this will affect a minor number of students, and that we certainly would want to be supportive of those families.
Are you keeping in section Roman numeral 12? Is that going to stay in?
Yes.
Okay.
And with those comments, I am finished.
Anybody else have any changes? Senator Prentice?
Chairperson Ward, and so Senator Hennessy. So I have two things I want to address, but I just want to, I think I figured out the equitable part. Before we strike that, I believe this has to do, and I'm not sure it's so clear here, because I've had a little bit of a back and forth with Christopher Arnold, and if I'm reading this correctly, and I think we might have to clarify the language. It has to do for students with disabilities and IEPs. So that's what they're looking to protect here. But when I look at the way it's written, it's not, I can see where you'd be like, well, what's equitable? So if they're looking to protect here or make sure that, students who have disability and IEPs are treated, the same way, military students with access to academic courses and programs and extracurricular activities, would you be comfortable with it expressly stating that?
I just don't understand what the, sorry, I don't understand what the intent is, or the way it's written, and if it's a disability intent. If the person had a special program, athletic program they were involved in, and they have a disability in their prior district where they came from, which I think would have been wonderful. Some of our small school districts don't have those same programs. So is this saying that they have to develop that program?
That's a good question. I don't, So let's kind of flip this around differently and just think about as is right now. If you move from one part of the state to another, military or not, even though I know we're working on a military-connected bill, what if you go to a different community and you have an IEP or a 504? Do they honor that for you, or do they what happens? So special educators in the room or anyone, that's because I know we're looking at this in the context of military service. I did some work with these folks at the Department of Defense when I worked for Interstate Compacts, so I'm really comfortable with what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring uniformity for these children and their families throughout the country. But since this is not a compact, and we might be able to just clarify the language for New Hampshire, I think if we can, we should. But if we take military out of it and just look at any child moving from one part of the state to another with their family, so they probably would have to be reevaluated. Do they have to be reevaluated? Sorry, Chairperson Warder, I'm kind of sort of taking over your meeting, and I don't mean to do that, but I'm a little bossy. So can we ask, or
Yes.
do you know?
But at the end, we need to find out exactly what the changes are, because I've heard so many changes back and forth.
And
That
it is an FN, and the time
Right.
frame is running out.
I'm trying to keep them all, but
We picked the most difficult one first, just so you
Okay.
know.
It needs so much work, that's the problem.
I think our I agree, but I think our military, I only have two small, what I think are relatively small things. So, mine are not respectfully maybe as complicated. But if this is, everything else doesn't, doesn't worry me. But if this is what they're trying to, the Department of Defense is trying to get at, how do we can we take care of it? So if I'm moving from where I live in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and my daughter has an IEP and I'm moving to Holbrook, what happens?
Thank you for the question. I cover up my school board association badge for a moment, just speak from a personal experience as being a special ed director in my previous life. So when students move within the state of New Hampshire, there is an obligation of the receiving district to accept the students, to meet as an IEP team and accept the student's IEP, and to make adjustments with the parents in terms of trying to make it commensurate to what the IEP was in the previous district. That's true within any district in New Hampshire. So if you move from Lebanon to Colebrook, your child's IEP basically is lifted from one district and placed in the other district. And then there's some adjustments that sometimes need to be made because of programming language, or, one reading program is called one thing and one other, in a district it's called something else. But the services and things like that, the program placements, those things are all maintained in the new district.
Okay, so if we're already doing that, so it's just a member of.
So what happens when somebody comes from out of state?
When someone comes from out of state, it's a similar process. The IEP team would meet to look at the IEP from the other state and translate it, so just for lack of a better term, to a New Hampshire IEP. The challenges and some of the questions I think Senator Prentice is getting at is that some of the eligibility criteria in other states are not the same as they are in New Hampshire, or the categories in which we identify students are different in New Hampshire than they might be in another state. So there's sometimes additional evaluations that need to happen from one state to the other. Massachusetts, for example, doesn't classify their students with disabilities in the same way that New Hampshire does. So when a student moves from Massachusetts, there are steps that the IEP team in the new district has to take to ensure that they can translate that as well. But there is also language that states that the receiving school in New Hampshire still has to do their best to maintain the IEP to the best of their ability while they're going through that process. It's not as if the child just comes in and doesn't have any services.
Starting from the beginning, I have a number 1 to take out or militia.
That was one of my, yes, militia.
Okay.
It's line 2.
Line 1 and 2, at the end of line 1, and the first word on 2. Page 1.
Page 1. Very top.
1 and 2.
Strike those?
No,
Just
strike the word
or,
militia on line.
Comma or militia.
Okay. And then, did you want to keep 23, 24, 25, or was that coming out?
I still think it causes confusion. If we're confused about what it means.
Doesn't hurt.
I think it causes confusion, as to what they would be guaranteed when they come into the state. So I would prefer to be taken out.
Yes, we eliminate 23, 24, 25.
Yep.
Is
And
that
if there's
okay with
any
everyone?
clarifying language that needs to come in a future date to ensure something or another, I would entertain that at this time. But this is, if we need to act on it, I would delete it now.
Okay,
On page 1, lines 23 through 25.
yes. And then we have the big, long thing, that's Senator Hennessy.
Yeah, so page 2.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, sure.
So what I have written down on page 2, lines 4 through 11, we would edit line 5, notification from ... shall provide the student with access to licensed counseling services, period. Then is the intention of the committee to strike lines 7 through 11 and get rid of the individualized
Yes.
services? Does that make sense?
My intention, yeah.
So licensed counseling services, and they'll take us down through line 15?
Well, yeah, so we would strike,
Take it down through 12.
yeah. And then it sounds like the committee wants to keep lines 12 through 15. However, on line 15, we want to delete parent or guardian and just leave it at student. So it would say, any other service, agency, or resource necessary to support or provide assistance to the student, period. Is that right?
Sounds
Okay.
fine with me.
Does that, I thought that captured what Senator Hennessy was working on that portion. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, anything else on the page 2? And page 3, we are striking on line 25, the end of that line, regardless of the capacity of the district.
Yeah, that's what I have.
And we're keeping 33, 34, 35?
Yep.
Okay.
And then I think Representative Prentice has something for the section on page 4, right?
I do.
Okay, why don't you tell us what it is?
I will. Thank you, Chair Ward. So, my microphone's on. Good. Right up in the, so line 1, which is what, 310A1 dash, it's a really small, what is that, 0? Military service members and spousal temporary licensure. So this here should be changed. What I'd like to do is change it from the Office of Personnel Licensure and Certification to the appropriate state agency, because not all licenses are issued, with all due respect to OPLC, from OPLC. So yes, because, so a perfect, sorry, Ava. you gave
No,
me
I'm
these,
just, I'm sorry, no, I'm listening, I'm just trying to hear what
Gave
you
me these-
said.
you gave
So you
me-
said change to,
You gave me these, change to the appropriate state agency. And I bring this up because one of the most common professions and requests for licensure come from emergency medical services for either the member of the military or their spouse. Emergency medical service licensure comes out of the Department of Safety, not OPLC. And there might be other, where does teacher licensure come from? So it comes from DOE. So I think if we just expand that, it just directs it to the right state agency. That's all I'm trying to do. And, because if we left it as is, I'm concerned. Maybe in DOE, I don't know if DOE is worried, but I know that the language as it's written could become a problem for EMS, or if they wanted to get an EMS license. That's all.
Sorry to jump in, but I'm just saying, it's not gonna work. And it's not gonna work because we're putting it into statute in 310. 310 is very specific to OPLC and its licensed agencies.
Ooh, good catch. Another gold star.
So what are we gonna,
Okay, so how does this sound now? Top of page 4, Senator Prentice.
so if we can't, gee, We can't amend-
It's either replicate the paragraph for multiple agencies so that it gets tucked into, whether it's 189 or, and then you're wanting something under safety, which is going to be another section.
but does it need, may I? Do we have to name the individual agencies?
You need the statute, the statutory site.
Oh, so that's,
So 310A1, Jay is saying, is the Office of Professional Licensure.
okay.
Right. I don't have that memorized, but Jay does.
In RSA 153.
Hang around long enough.
See, this is going to require further clarification because EMS licenses come under RSA 153A, but there's also a connection, I believe, to 21P12. I thought it was going to be as simple as just changing that line.
Could we get a
I have
floor
to call-
amendment on that?
We'll have to get a floor, I'll call the attorneys over at safety, but are there any other agencies that aren't covered by OPLC? Do we need, do we want to make sure that they're in, if a member of the military or their spouse are coming here, that, that they get the same treatment at any of these state agencies? And if we just, unless I'm reading this wrong, if we're just looking at OPLC, then that wouldn't happen, because they would.
So you're saying we're missing some Department of Safety
I know we're
ones?
just saying that. What about
And
Department of
Education?
Would this affect the Department of Education? Okay, so,
You would want it to. If you wanted this to be thorough, you would want this to be inclusive.
Of all licenses in the state.
But I guess I would say leave it as it is because it sets up in statute something that either at our next two shots at this, which are either on the floor or with Finance Committee, that can be changed, that can be added to, or in the house, no. So we've got shots at altering that to be more inclusive. And if not, at least it's someplace in statute where it can be replicated at a future date.
I just,
What do we do?
understood. I'm happy to work on a floor amendment if we're gonna, proceed this way, but I just wanna point out, in my experience, is that in particular, emergency medical services is a place, and especially when we're trying to recruit
Yep.
people, we have a special task force at the Department of Safety looking at this right now, and members of the military and their spouses, this is such a common place for them, to come to, they want to, not maybe New Hampshire, but practicing EMS. I think if we go ahead and we pass this as is and have to wait another year, then we are going to be like ruling out a whole population of people that would really benefit from this. Not just the communities that would get these EMTs, but these members of the military and their spouses. I'm happy to work on a floor amendment. I'll call OPLC to find out who they don't cover and make sure that we get education, EMS, and anybody else. I think it's very few, is my experience.
So you're going to talk to OPLC
I'll do
about that
OPLC, I'll do
particular,
safety, and I'll take care of DOA.
that paragraph.
Correct.
When you do safety, just check on police and fire, because, for the same reason.
Yeah, good. They don't license, they certify. So, and no, they don't even, their certification isn't required. Police certification is required, you are correct, but fire certifications are not. So police standards and training, all right, good catch.
Sheriff? Is that still police standards and training?
Yeah, that's where they all go, okay. Senator Hennessy, oh my.
So we have made some changes.
I'd like one more. I don't think lines 23 on down one, I don't think it's essential for this bill. And two, if it is, it really ought to have a separate hearing. We didn't get OPLC's opinion on this. I'd be good taking it out.
Senator Khan, what page, I'm sorry, what page?
Page 4, line 23,
And you're suggesting, just so I can write it down.
strike number 9.
Strike down, including 29?
Yes.
Oh, number 9, not,
Yeah,
Right.
that's where I'm getting confused. So starting on line 23 on page 4, you want to strike lines 23 through what line?
29.
Through line 29, okay.
Okay. And Prentice will work on a floor amendment on that first paragraph on page 4.
Putting a note in here. yeah.
What's our timing on this?
On it?
What's our timing? An FN needs to be done by,
April 19th is the last day for us to vote out FN. So
So,
it's- from
so
what I,
if you wanted to do a cleaned up amendment and get it for us for Tuesday, we could.
Clean
act
up,
on
or
it
we can
Tuesday.
look at it next Tuesday to be sure that all the changes are in there.
so just to clarify, we're not planning to exec this today then?
I guess not, because
Or
we need to know what the floor amendment is like. Now, I'd be happy to
Committee
exec it
amendment.
today, but it seems to me that it would be nice to look at the finished copy and with the information from the OPLC, and then we can include that maybe.
So we're looking for a senator to bring in an amendment the next time we meet that incorporates all these changes? Is that what we're asking?
I think, can we just do a committee amendment with you,
sure.
with you asking for it?
Sure.
I mean, if the chair wants to do it under her name, that's fine.
Yeah, to the
We can get it
committee
done.
amendment with the changes that we have made so far.
Well, I'll have to research that a bit, but I mean, we're not adopting anything today. We just were discussing changes. So either way, I'm happy to get it drafted in the committee's name, whomever's name. I just wanted to clarify that we're not taking action on this. The committee didn't adopt anything today. We just want to put these changes in an amendment to then look at all together at the next time we meet. Is that correct?
I can go either way. If you want to finish it up today,
let's finish it up today. Let's make a,
vote to pass as
I
amended.
move ought to pass as, no, I move ought to pass, and I would like to then move a committee amendment that we just discussed.
Do we have a second on the ought to pass?
Second on Countess.
Made by Senator Hennessy, seconded by Senator Ward. And then Senator Hennessy moved the committee amendment that we just discussed that I'm Yes. going to review shortly once we get a second on the committee amendment.
So the effective date is upon this passage.
Wonder if there should be a separate effective date. Paragraph
I guess I have a, while we're thinking about effective
1B.
date, I have a question about that same line.
29?
Yeah, because, and maybe I'm missing it, but I don't read that, what if the water well filling station installed prior to the effective date has already been tested?
Do you want to come up?
Cynthia Clemens with the Department of Environmental Services Engineering Institute.
Thank you. So if the, for that line 29, that would be bottle filling stations installed prior to the effective date of this section, they would have, they might have tested it as part of round 1, because there's 3 rounds that are required to be tested as part of the original requirement. And there would be 2 additional rounds that need to be tested. But if it was installed between the round 1 and the following rounds, it would not have been tested. So
by giving it the 180 days, it would fall within one of those testing rounds. And the other issue is that the first round, the action level was 15 parts per billion. That was, and now the standard would be 5.
So follow up on that. So the 3 rounds of testing that need to be done, and the round started in 2016. So what if that water filling station has already been tested 3 times? No?
At the most, it would have been tested 1 time.
Okay. So it's been tested 1 time, and it's 3 parts per million, or whatever.
No.
Rounds of testing.
But now reconcile for us the different levels, 0.15 versus 0.05.
So say that particular bottle fill station didn't test at 3 parts per billion, it tested at 8.
Yes.
So it's above the new, below the old standard, but above the new. This would say it needs to be, it would not comply with this section, and it would have to be removed, and I believe it says it would have to be remediated within the timeline that is required to be remediated, which is present a plan within 180 days of notification. So either, wherever it falls, it either will be tested again, or it will be remediated to comply with the new standard. So I think you've captured all the scenarios.
Your office is going to, because of this, you'll reconfirm if the additional testing is needed and remediation. The additional remediation is needed.
Right, so there will be 2 additional rounds of testing, and wherever that fixture falls will dictate additional remediation.
Would there be some immediate request from your department if this passes to say you have to test quickly because you're out of compliance? Or you have to remediate, you have to remediate quickly.
So it will require, yes, it will
Shut
require
down.
review of the round 1 data. And that is in
Good.
paragraph, that's page 3, line 5, within 90 days. The facilities shall compare the results of the round 1 data to the new standard.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I just want to confirm the way line 6 through 11 is written. If a facility is testing drinking water outlets for lead and remediating them where necessary, they do not have to install water bottle filling stations in accordance with paragraph 2.
That's correct. This introduces another option of installing bottle fill stations in lieu of testing and remediating.
And then water bottle filling stations can be very expensive sometimes for small childcare facilities. If they follow the procedures to put up, like, don't drink this water wherever they need to, aren't there other options for water in a facility like a childcare facility other than a water bottle filling station as described here?
Yeah, the remediation, well, testing and remediating, which is typically to replace the faucet for a low lead containing faucet. And that's generally enough to remediate the fixture. So it can be remediated by changing the fixture or by installing an alternate bottle fill station. And we do expect to have funding for the remediation through a couple different programs. We don't have funding yet from the federal water infrastructure improvements from the nation WIN funding. The only funding that we have for that is for testing, but we are expecting to have funding for remediation.
That is, has not been approved yet, so that's one option. A second option might be through the ARPA, the American Relief Plan Act funds. We're trying to get, to explore the availability of those funds for childcare facilities. And the third option that we have is through the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. That they have already approved a grant for schools. They have not approved any funding for childcare facilities yet, but that could be a possibility as well for remediation.
I know that when we hear things, bills dealing with lead, and this may have been more of my house days, sometimes people who do the testing, it's difficult to get them. Is that still the case, or is this something as easy as like fill up the water and send it in someplace?
So because we do have money for testing now from the water infrastructure, the WIN money, we are setting up an RFP for a laboratory contract, and that could be multiple laboratories throughout the state as long as they're certified for drinking water lead analysis. So they will facilitate the testing process and the collection. So the laboratory would send out the bottles to the facility, and we also have a contractor assisting that to provide instructions to the facility so that they can collect the samples and ship them back.
So the facility collects them themselves, we don't
That's-
need a lead certified person
You
to
don't
go-
need
okay.
need a lead service, so we will provide instructions through the contractor to get this accomplished, yes. And that is through the federal funding that we are able to do that, which is new from the original bill. We didn't have that until now.
It's good to know that there's funding.
Yes. Because round one we didn't have any funding, either for the data collection or the sampling or the laboratories.
So comments?
I move HB 1421 ought to pass.
I'll second that. Further discussion?
Move amendment 1239S.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's 5. Move the bill with the amendment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move consent.
Second.
All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I just make one comment, one
Sure.
correction? In the newspaper, there was an article published today that cited the numbers that we have for the round one testing incorrectly, and I just wanted, for the record, that what we have for run for the testing so far, we had about 90% of the schools reporting and about 60% of the daycares reporting, of the childcares reporting. And the numbers were different in the article. So just for your information, we had 90% of schools and 60% of daycares, and we have this contractor now doing outreach to get that additional testing completed. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So who's taking it out?
You are.
I am. Okay, Ward is taking it out.
It's your amendment.
What kind of time do we have? 3:37. Oh heavens, we have another half hour. You want to do an easy one?
Don't ever say that, because
I know.
Senator Ward, how about, you heard it today, I wasn't in the room, but 1594, relative to the assistance to certain students with disabilities in registering to vote.
1594?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd move off the pass if you want to do that.
Second.
There's an amendment I'd like to make.
All those in favor?
Nope,
Whoa.
oh. I think we have a committee amendment. good.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I'm like, no, it has to do with voting.
We're striking the weather.
Not an FN, no. We're trying to do the FNs.
On line 7, I'd like to suggest we strike the word whether, replace the word is with as.
And after goal, add or competency.
Okay.
With
Okay.
as after registration. So discuss voter registration as an appropriate community living, citizenship, training, goal, or competency. So add or competency to be included, blah, blah, blah.
Very good.
All right.
So I just, Senator Ward, if I may. So my question about striking whether. So I'm completely in favor of this, but what I want to point out is it makes shall 10 times more positive and it becomes a mandate.
So
Yeah, I mean, that's,
we-
I'm not saying, I'm not using the other word with this, I'm just saying,
Yeah. So we discussed this a little bit.
all right, and I was not here,
Yeah,
so.
but I think, so the team shall discuss voter registration as an appropriate community to be included in the IEP or Section 504 plan. And if so, I think they still have, this is, I think, and he can speak for himself, Senator Khan was nervous that the shall wasn't strong enough and that he wanted to make sure they were discussing it as to be part of the IEP or 504 plan. But there still is in a 1 in 1,000, there might be some chance where it's, shouldn't be included as a goal or a competency, was my take on the discussion we had.
Okay.
So if you read it, do you get that same reading? Sorry, I've taken over.
So I can interject a question,
Included-
we're
so-
talking about this. Do all the students at some time in their high school have civics and discuss voting registration and being helped to talk about how it's done and that kind of stuff? Or is this specifically only for people with IEPs?
So there's no prescription as to when civics is taught. So because there's an IEP and it has established learning objectives for that year for that student, this is beyond that civics requirement.
Okay. So my question, what I was thinking of, not all kids with IEPs have trouble understanding. They do a lot of stuff in the classrooms. So I was wondering, the time in the classroom, do they at some point there discuss how to sign up, what voting is all about? In which case, I don't know what you want to do, either students who are unable to participate in classroom discussions or have some qualification for who. I mean, are there
Right.
people with IEPs that are so, so badly off that they can't understand some of the instruction?
I think that might be the case, and not so much badly off, just the additional assistance. What there are in the IEPs, particularly for a 17, 18-year-old student, is the transition plan from school to whatever assistance they need for functioning outside of the school environment. So this as a function would be a part of that transition plan. It may be appropriate for some students, it may be inappropriate for some students
For some
to
students
have,
with
to
AP.
have that transition plan in that 17-year-old year. It might
Okay.
be in the 19-year-old year for some students. Right.
So this is not for all the people with IEPs. This is for those who need special instruction, who cannot participate in classroom discussions on civics?
If they still have an IEP in their senior year and they have a transition plan beyond college, beyond the high school, hey, thank you. You may know more on this than any of us. But the point is that not all students who have IEPs while they're in high school will have one when they're 17 or 18.
Okay.
Number one. Otherwise, that would be a universe of 30,000 students. So, not all have one in their senior year. If there is one in the senior year, and if that senior year has a transition plan beyond the senior year, I would assume this goal, competency, whatever, is going to be a part of that transition plan.
Okay.
And we've eliminated the word whether, is our proposal here, so that so that it's not conditional, it's an expectation that if you are transitioning with a transition plan beyond your school year, that it will be a part of that discussion.
Okay.
Part of the discussion, but may not actually end up in the plan.
Might not.
Okay.
And that's because of the goals and competencies language?
The team shall
Jay-
discuss voter registration as an appropriate to be included. So they shall discuss it. And if it's gonna be included, if so, when and how voter registration should be accomplished. I think the original language is the exact same thing as it does now, except for the competency piece, but this makes it stronger, maybe.
So where's competency added? Training goal or,
And the point of.
do you have it, Ava?
Yeah.
Do you have that last part written?
So, yes, I think.
Okay.
I see Senator Prentice's hand raised, I see the lovely Becky Wilson from the SBA asking to approach, there's a lot. I just wanted to clarify
Do you want to talk about this? Come up so we can hear you.
That's why I was raising my hand. The sponsor's back in the room, but I also saw that Becky had her hand up, so.
And I don't know what that means.
There's too many of us, hold
Oh,
on.
sorry, okay. Sorry, I just want to try to help clarify because I feel like you're agonizing over something that perhaps you don't need to. So any transition planning is required for all students with an IEP starting at age 14 through either when they graduate with a regular ed diploma or until they turn 21. That is the requirement of the law. And part of transition planning for all students with an IEP, regardless of the severity of their disability or what category, is looking at different areas such as community engagement, independent living, employment. There's all sorts of areas that the IEP team is required to look at. Voting, registration for voting would probably fall under community engagement. And for every student with an IEP, you're talking about, does the child require services to help them meet their community engagement goals? So for some students, as you're talking about, they're functioning fairly independently, they want to live independently, they're going to live on their own, they won't need assistance registering to vote most likely. They would benefit from what every student gets in their civics class, which is instruction on how to register to vote. They would not have a community living goal, so to speak, as their transition plan. For some of these students you're talking about who might need more support, you would be writing a goal for community engagement about how they would register to vote and who would be responsible for helping the student meet that goal.
Okay. Senator Sharp.
So, I don't want to speak for you, Senator Ward, but I think what Senator Ward was asking is, do children who don't need IPA get educated in their school about how to vote? Am I correct? Is that what your question was? That's what I think.
IPA is what we'll have when we go home today. It says IEP.
So, I'm sorry. Okay.
Your intention was okay, we understand. I
We need
understand.
DNA in this. I'm sorry.
My question, if I can restate it, was that not all students with an IEP need specialized attention. Those who do not and participate a lot in the regular classroom activities, is there a time in the classroom where they discuss voting and how to go about it and just understand about ballots and warrants and things like that?
Yes, that would
In
be
which case, I didn't
covered.
want those people, those students with IEPs to have to sit through a special thing if they're already learning it in the regular classroom setting. That
Thank
was
you.
my
Thank you
question.
for your question. Yes, your civics, your general civics classes that is required for graduation, all students who are getting a regular education diploma, who are getting those are going to learn in their civics class how to register to vote and how voting works. Every student with an IEP, regardless, you're not adding anything to their plate by talking about voter registration as part of the transition planning. If they don't need any support services for that, that will be documented and it will just move on.
Thank you.
And just one other thing to keep in mind with it, that's discussed in education rules. I mean, the curriculum of civics you would find in a ED 306 that's probably in the yellow book.
Probably. ED3, the rules 306.
Do we have a motion on this, Ava? We're not taking any more hands.
We have a motion on the ought to pass, we do not have a motion on the amendment.
That would be a committee amendment. Yeah.
Chair Ward, just because the sponsor back in the minutes, he had his hand up, I didn't know if there was something you wanted to add that would help clarify your question.
My question has been clarified.
Your question was clarified?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So we're doing exactly what we said during the hearing, striking the word whether, changing is to as, leaving the goals, and adding the word or competencies.
Yes, you may.
Try to understand the concern and address it if possible, and maybe some of the language, I don't want to make more out of something that maybe isn't there in terms of overcomplicating things. So, maybe if to sort of satisfy the sort of the appropriateness factor that we're talking about, maybe some of the language could potentially be changed if we're going to strike the word whether and then put appropriate where after 504 plan and if appropriate when and how to register to vote. I think the concept of the goal, so that I don't know if that addresses Senator Khan's concerns. I think as a practical matter, and I'm sorry, I don't know who was testifying or who was here before, but I think as a practical matter at the IEP table, under the current language, it may end up sorting itself out in terms of whether or not there needs to be a plan in effect for the student in terms of the goal. So, it may be already that they have a plan. It's just documented in that formula. So, I don't want to. I think the driver of the conversation is to have that conversation at that table, and that if there is a need for accommodation or a plan that's incorporated in, there may not be because of whatever variable there is. The student will, it's just documented. So I don't want to overcomplicate something, but maybe if the language was insistent on striking whether, there might be appropriate language that you could move that. I'm not sure that might be one thought if we're kind of feeling the need to move the word whether out. But I don't know if that's helpful.
There are a couple of changes. There'll be a committee amendment, so.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to be struck, voter registration as appropriate community living, citizenship, training goal, and then we added or competency included in the IEP of Section 304 plans. That's it.
And then if I'm wondering if would entertain sort of striking the words so as appropriate and inserting instead of so appropriate.
And if appropriate?
if appropriate,
Fine.
then, instead of if so, if that would be. That's
Line
on
eight.
line, yep. Line 8.
Right in the middle. Line 8, we're wishing to strike if so.
If appropriate.
So,
To just striking so, and then it would be appropriate.
so if appropriate is what we want it to read.
No. That so comes before when and how voter registrations should
And
be.
if appropriate, when and how.
I think it'd be modifying the when and how vote, if it's all of this is appropriate as a goal, it would modify when and how the voter registration would occur, I think.
Ava, why don't you read from line 6 after the comma, or will, and just read slowly those sentences.
You read my mind. Or will be during that academic year, the team shall discuss voter registration as an appropriate community living / citizenship training goal or competency to be included in the IEP or Section 504 plan, and, if appropriate, when and how voter registration should be accomplished.
Thank you.
Is that?
Move that committee amendment.
I mean, I think that could work as well.
It works fine.
I hope, okay.
Senator Khan just moved the committee amendment. Would anybody like to second that? I'll second it.
Rishadi seconds it.
Great. Now we need a vote on the committee amendment.
All those in favor of the committee amendment?
Aye.
Say yes. Aye. Opposed?
Move on to pass as amended.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the bill as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Move consent.
Second.
All those in favor of consent? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll take it out.
You want to take it out? Okay. I think that takes care of that.
We have 3 minutes. Can I ask Senator Prentice a question?
No.
Certainly.
Okay. Senator Prentice was going to look into 1521. Has to do with the yellow books.
Oh, I got an answer on that today. Let me see if I can get my email.
I'd like to ITL it.
Me too.
Well, okay, hold on a
But if
second.
you- unless
I
you
got
can
a
come up with
response
an
from
answer.
Linda Tanner. Hold on.
1521.
We have,
Kill it because you can't get the
So,
books.
members,
no, because it sounds like they might be, so, hold on, just if I may. I know, see, you wanted the 3 minutes. We could have gotten,
Madam Chair and members, that's what I was going to say. Not that I am encouraging that we're here all night. There's no one scheduled in this room after 4 o'clock. So if we went past, not that I'm encouraging that we stay here forever, but I'm just saying it's not like a hard stop normally like we are at 12:30 when we meet in the morning because another committee's coming after.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to know.
I do have a 4 o'clock, I was trying to.
and I'm turning to city council meeting. Okay, if I may. So, it sounds like they might have worked out a way. They said that if so Linda Tanner, didn't she sponsor this bill?
Yes.
She wants to hold the line on this because she said, you know, it will be, if we say that it will be printed, then it will be printed. And there was also something in, okay, but there's truth in that, like, and also she was gonna talk to Dave because, so I didn't have time to fully read this. Hold on a second. Books, they will be.
This one's given up.
Incentive to
2
solve.
more minutes.
I'm sorry, I literally.
Could I, while she's looking, could I say something?
It's quick. 30 seconds.
I just wanted to explain my reasoning for the ITL. It's not because I don't think they shouldn't have the books, or I don't want them to have the books, but I'm going back to the hearing report and the problem with the printing and the obsoleteness of it. So that's why I'm saying I would like to make the motion on HB 1521 FN ITL.
I will second it for exactly the same reasons. Why going forward and requesting books to be sent if they're not going to be printed?
It sounds
I
like,
guess I heard the conclusion that the publisher wants to get out of the business of doing this,
Yep.
but I didn't hear that that's a drop dead. That there's absolutely no way it can be printed. I didn't hear that. Just that the publisher would prefer not to be doing this.
Well, it's not,
There may not be,
we can,
we may not be able to have but one publisher, and so we're kind of tied to somebody's cost of $112 each,
right.
but,
Well, so
small price, it seems.
We have
I heard a different story. I heard a nice testimony that said, publisher wants to get out, so we're not gonna be able to do this in the future. But also, and I think we're doing the House a lot of justice by trying to fix these bills that they're sending over to us with a lot of issues in normal. When I was in this House, the Senate would not have fixed House bills. But at the beginning of each session, providing a physical copy of the book. We cannot provide a physical copy of the book at the beginning of each session because what happened last session has not been completed, like put into book format yet. So you could get the book maybe in February, but that's not at the beginning of the biennium. So there's lots of like technical things that are wrong with the wording here too.
And in the report, Senator Ward asked Director Alakunis if he is implying that we will no longer have these books. Director Alakunis said yes. He is not sure why they are in the business of doing this. And he said he had a similar discussion with his counterpart in Virginia. They also said it's been difficult to find somebody to publish. They're not interested in publishing the book. So my feeling is that why should we put something in law of providing books when we know that they are very reluctant in having anything to do with it? So that's my reason for why I want to ITL this.
right. May I? So I'll vote against an ITL because I think that the House committee, the House committee voted unanimously, including the chairman, Rick Ladd. I'd like to make sure that, he and that policy committee is asking us to help them with what they think is a significant issue, which is their ability to access, these references, whether they're in chambers or they're at home doing what is largely for all of us a volunteer job. So I heard kind of sort of like, I thought I heard Dave Alcunis that they would not be printing the paperback, maybe, but he also pointed to those that maybe they're not going to be
He said
printing
that nobody
anything
wants to print
anymore.
those
But we have a policy committee asking us, like, how do we, including a chair, asking, us, to help them see this through. Now, so that's just where, like, I bring my own computer. I'm able to do all of this stuff, go back and forth and make references as needed. But I'm looking, at a large group doing really important work that is saying, please, like, we don't all have access to a computer. We're not all working with these on the fly, and we need this resource in front of us. How do we help them solve that problem?
I guess we'll have to talk to Ladd about it, but I just find it's very easy to say, yeah, we'd like to have all these books before we start our session in January. That is not going to happen, because if the changes don't get in until November, and then there has to be going to the printer, we're not going to have it.
What if it's just a matter, okay, agreed, but is getting it late better than not getting it at all?
But that's not what the bill says. But also, What happens when the printer says, sorry, we're not gonna print these anymore? What does the state of New Hampshire do now that this is in statute, that we have to have these books? It's not that I don't want the books. The books are very useful, and I do love a print version over an online version. But we're slowly transitioning as a society to using less paper, and, I mean.
Which I'm all for.
Yeah, but that's the thing, and if we cannot find a printed version, no matter how much we think it's a great idea, I feel as if the House didn't hear from the same people who we heard from that said these books are not gonna be printed, because I have to imagine it wouldn't have come out of their committee unanimously.
Bishardi?
Could we do interim study on this? And the point being,
Yes.
let's leave that, if the conclusion is that it can be done, then we can come back before November and find that out. This,
Bishardi?
I want to make it clear that when I said ITL, it's not because I don't think the book has value. The bill, the way it's written, and the problems, that's the reason. And we want to accommodate people, but we're not supposed to be fixing and changing so many of these House bills. And that's what we're doing, and we're spending a lot of time on one bill, and we have FNs and we have a deadline, and so that's all I'm saying. It's not, the way the bill is written, we can't accommodate it.
Well, we need to take a vote on it. Either we'll ITL it, or we just drag it on to the next week.
So, Madam Chair, I think Senator Khan, and he will correct me if I'm wrong, was trying to rescind or requesting the folks that motioned ITL to rescind it so he could introduce an interim study. I don't know if the members who motioned ITL are wanting to do that or not, but he did say that. So I thought I'd bring us.
Thank you.
I couldn't hear you down here.
Oh, sorry.
Ask and everything.
So you want
Sorry.
interim study? Is that what you're doing?
If the motion is withdrawn for ITL.
I'll be happy to support interim study.
So-
I have to remove my previous,
I will withdraw my motion for inexpedient to legislate.
Senator Khan has moved interim study, it
Yes.
sounds like.
yes.
Yes.
And we have a second, Senator Ward. Great.
Yes.
Excellent. So now we are ready to vote unless there's more discussion.
Any discussion on the interim study? How many vote on interim study?
Aye.
I
Aye.
So that's 5-0. Do you want to put that on
Move
consent?
consent.
I would vote against it.
No consent?
I would vote against consent.
Okay, then we
But
won't
you
do
can do
consent.
vote 4-1.
Why, I'm sorry, why? I couldn't hear you.
Just in case there's more information that is had in the next 10 days that,
Can't
you
you
know,
just take it
You
off
can pull it
consent
off.
then?
I could take it off consent. That's true.
Oh, my goodness.
So what do we do?
Okay.
So, Senator Shardy moves consent. Is there a second?
I'll second it. All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
It's 5-0. Who wants to take it out? Senator Khan, do you want to take it out?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to take it out?
No, you take it out, because if you're gonna bring something and
Yeah.
amend it,
We'll leave it.
you'll be the one speaking to
See
it.
today.
Good.
What's our deadline on FNs? Just because I do have a city council meeting to make it to in my district.
So just to confirm, Senator Khan or Senator Prentice is taking this out?
Senator Khan is taking this out because he might bring some additional language, so it will go with him.
Okay. And to your question, Senator. So to Senator Prentice's question,
Sorry.
we have, so today is the 6th. So we have next Tuesday, the 12th, and then the following Tuesday, the 19th, to hear the FN bills that we just got from the House a few days ago. So we have more FNs, and exec out all the remaining FNs, and we still have a number of hearings of non-FN bills. So we are really down to the wire. We only exec'd 3 FNs today. We had 7 to begin with, so that leaves 4 plus the 2 that we have yet heard. So 6 FNs in addition to all the other bills that we have to exec out. And our deadline as a whole to exec out all House bills is 3 Tuesdays from now, so the 26th. So we got a bit of work ahead of us.
Here's an easy one. This one,
Did not,
Let me find out
don't start with
something.
that word in front of it, 'cause
this one I think will be, should it be,
Let-
try?
Let me check on something else first. Are we obligated to end so that you can go home?
No,
What is your schedule? We could do another bill.
I am happy, you are not obligated. I can be here as long as the committee needs me to be here.
We don't have to ask for special permission to
No,
apply to do that?
but I
Okay.
appreciate you asking. Nope, I can stay here as
Well,
late
I
as we
needed
need.
to know, so. Okay, what's your pleasure? Which one? 15:30?
15:13. I said 15:13 because we've already acted on this, and I don't know that we need to do any more. The bills are so close together.
I thought we heard that we need to change the wording to through age 21.
There was, the AG's office said that, their attorney, there's nobody in the House or and I don't, I'm the prime on the Senate bill. The language that came over from the House and what we did in the Senate is almost identical.
Right.
So I don't know that we need to do any more on 1513. I mean, it just, we've already taken a position on the bill. If the House has our bill, if they don't think that our wording is, but it has the same goal.
Well, the only thing we have to be absolutely certain of is that we have 21 inclusive.
Well, maybe we don't need to do that. Neither the Senate bill nor the House bill say that. Says through the end of the school calendar year, we said to the end of the school year. The only ambiguity there is here is what somebody said about August being the end of the school year versus June being the end of the school year. It was for the purpose of graduation that we heard from most people. There were a couple of parents who testified that they thought that it should go all the way through 21. I just don't think that the federal government would need to try to overturn 14 states, and maybe they've already gotten to one with Rhode Island, 14 states that had through the school year of 21. Let them do that. We do this all the time. Say we're not going to be guided by the federal government, particularly in this case, where the federal government's law says that it's only applicable if the state doesn't establish its own rule. So we've had our own rules since, I can't remember when this bill was written, but it's since like 1978.
Well, I've heard from the commissioner, and he says we're going to be in big trouble if we don't have 21 years inclusive. Cannot end at age, the birthday. You know, we had it so that if they turned 21 during the year that they went to school, they could continue to, finish up. But it has to be, if they want to do something during the summer or starting the next fall because they haven't turned 21 in 364 days, they have a right to do so. And apparently that's a new, federal law. Diana Fenton, can you?
That is correct. It has to be 21 inclusive.
Right.
I'm getting texts. People are intently watching
was a short one.
I'm sure that's not true. Diana Fenton, attorney for the Department of Ed, for the record. Yes, my understanding is that the way the law has been interpreted, and that is reflective in the case out of Rhode Island, is that the language needs to say 21 inclusive. If that change, and the original House bill, the original language in the House bill had the language correct. It was amended in the House, it came over here, and I think what was provided initially at the hearing was the original language. I think there was some confusion on that, but a lot of the testimony said it has to revert back to the as introduced House language, because that had the 21 inclusive. There is a concern that the state will be sued if there is not that 21 inclusive language. And I think that was the testimony this committee heard from Attorney Chris Bond, who represents the Attorney General's office. And every lawsuit is different. It would depend on the facts. But that is what all the lawyers are saying. And we are coming to consensus. And it is a rare occasion when lawyers come to consensus. But that was the testimony. It has to have that inclusive, 21 inclusive language.
So can we just add that to this bill? Instead of saying turns 21, 20, 21 inclusive?
I would go back to look at how it was originally introduced in the House.
The House,
Senator Ward, I'm just looking for clarification. What does 21 inclusive mean?
My understanding is 21 inclusive brings you up to 22.
Okay, that's what, thank you, all right. So when you say 21 inclusive, like we had this whole discussion about up to 22, but I just wanted that defined, at least on the record, like what 21 inclusive means, because I wanted to be sure. All right, fine.
Yeah, you're right, it does have that in the original.
Yes, the House bill as originally introduced had the language 21 inclusive, which it's the department's position. My understanding from the Attorney General's office, it's the Attorney General's office position, although I do not want to speak on their behalf, is that is the correct language, which will prevent a possible lawsuit.
And if I may, Chair Ward, I also remember hearing from, and I mean, I can go back to the hearing report, whether it was parents, or there was a department, or it was the attorney. It's not, like, they could turn 22 going into the next school year. They want to make sure, it's like having like continuous coverage for, like for healthcare. Graduation or the end of the school year, if they're not 22 until the fall, they want to carry that coverage through, because what if there's a summer program that, you know, they need to attend, or they're going to go into the next year because they're not going to graduate and they're still that age. So that, you know, they're, you know, 21 inclusive. I heard that. I've got the hearing report open in front of me, but I remember that distinctly. I don't know if anybody else does.
Can we just make the changes that we are not going with as amended, but we're going with the original bill from the House?
no, I'll be definitely against it. You know, if that, think of all of the times that this Senate in this session has said, we're not going to be intimidated by government mandates. And this isn't even a mandate. This is a court ruling, and in one state. And because of what I think is a misinterpretation by the court. And, you know, we can all have that opinion. I've read the opinion. This bill as it is before us, with the amendment, passed the House 19-0. Were they all wrong? It passed in this committee 5-0, with almost the exact same wording.
Madam Chair, I did not hear, when we heard Senator Kahn's bill this year, I did not hear any of the testimony inclusive.
We did. Sorry.
Inclusive of age 21. I didn't hear that we needed to change.
Mr. Bond was part of that conversation.
Maybe, and I apologize, maybe I wasn't here that day. Anyway, it's new to me.
Guess we can ITL the bill, or we can do something. But you know, once now that I know that it has to be 21 inclusive, I cannot honestly vote and take that out. You know, once you learn something that, and if we lose our federal money for education because we are not using that word, inclusive, I don't want to be responsible for it, whether we like it or not.
I don't
that-
believe that would be the case, because
Yeah, well-
first, there would need to be a federal action, and not just against the state of New Hampshire. We're talking about 14 other states, 13 at least. Not sure about 14.
I know, but you know, sometimes the federal government comes with rules and we have to follow them or we lose something. They have a carrot and a stick. So, I don't know. Yes. Senator Prentice.
With all due respect, and it's not even the federal part of it, there were parents, that's what stuck out in my mind. And I'm looking at Stacy Phillips, her testimony that talked about Pamela Eddy. You know, so we had at least 2 parents that came forward with children, you know, that are looking to see this be inclusive up to age 22. So the federal part of it, I'm just thinking about the parental part of it, these parents that came before us, because there are learning opportunities. And I guess, Senator Khan, help me understand, you don't want to do 21 inclusive, or you do?
I don't want to do 21 inclusive. It is.
Why?
Why? Because school districts already are doing essentially, school districts are exceeding our current statutes now. There's a cost burden that we will shift onto school districts to push this to 21 plus 364 days. And a student would have an IEP that cannot be completed in that school year. That's the problem that there is right now. And if I am reading body language from the person that I would most go to for special education confirmation in this room. But the point here is we've got letters from the Disability Rights Center, from the Parent Information Center, from gobs of advocates for special education students who are saying, no, we got it right. This is what we should be doing, is helping students get through the year in which they have an IEP and let them complete that in the year that they turn 21. You want to be intimidated by, you know, by the commissioner or or a court ruling in Rhode Island, then you won't go with what these 2 bills have done.
With all due respect, I'm not coming from a perspective what the commissioner wants to do, or, you know, I just it struck me, so I went back to the hearing report and found that there were parents that talked about this. And said, Denise, Senator Ricciardi has her hand up. I'm just letting you know, because you can't see her with her hand up. Maybe you should, like, you should reach over.
May I speak?
Yes.
So-
Sorry, Senator Ward.
Thank you. So again, I'm going to look at the hearing report, and so this parent said she opposes this bill due to the amended version, but supports the concept of the bill. She's a parent of a child with special needs. Parents know federal law guarantees our children access to education through age 22. And she mentioned that Minnesota allowed students to complete their education through age 26. New Hampshire should be age 22 inclusive.
No, 21 inclusive.
I'm reading.
Well, she's saying 22.
What she said, though, I'm just saying, so.
Well, on my notes here, I have a star. Federal law prevails. School calendar definition. Rosenberg, Teresa, revert to original bill. That's her recommendation. So obviously there is something there, and I don't think that we can argue. The court has said something and the federal government prevails.
maybe not here. Senator Ward, can we, I know I'm prolonging this, but I just am interested in what Becky Wilson has to say. Is it possible?
Sure.
Because I'm, yeah, I'm conflicted.
I apologize. I know you've had a long day. The difference between the two bills, and I think the language, at least from what I'm hearing you talk about, is the difference between allowing a child to complete the school year regardless of what age you determine should be the end of their services versus using the birth date to determine the end of services. If you do 21 inclusive, then my interpretation of that, and Diana can correct me if I'm wrong, would be the day the child turns 22, regardless of when that happens in the school year, that child is done with school. If you do inclusive of the school year in which the child turns 21, I think there's some room to vet out what the school year calendar means. Is that the district school year? Is it the child's year-round program? What is the end of the school year? But you're allowing the student to finish out their program for that year in which they turn 21. There is some nuance, I think, and just in listening to the conversation, I think to Senator Prentice's concern, the parents are concerned that their parents' programs are ending just in the middle of whatever their year may be. 21 inclusive, the way that that language is interpreted by people in the profession would mean that you would be giving them additional services until they turn 22, but regardless of when they turn 22, then that would be the end of that.
And we have the same problem when they turn 22 as we have currently when they turn 21.
But it could give them adult education classes over the summer, depending on when they turn 22, and then maybe even be able to have another term in school or some other educational services. I don't know. All I know is that what the rule is, and I guess I will follow it until I hear something different.
So just to clarify, Madam Chair, I know I stepped out and Cam was kind enough to keep my seat warm for me. We haven't made a motion on this bill whatsoever.
we have-
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Right.
Well, I move ought to pass then.
You move what?
I would move ought to pass.
Senator Khan moves ought to pass. I will second that. All those in favor?
I thought we just spent 40 minutes, I don't know, it seemed like it discussing that we were gonna, that some people on the committee wanted to change it to 21 inclusive.
Yep.
But that doesn't do that in this bill.
You are correct.
I'll make,
I mean,
can
it's,
make
I-
an
I'm not,
amendment.
I'm not trying to convince you.
I
what-
can
what
make
it-
an amendment that we revert to the original bill.
Somebody needs to second ought to pass.
Sorry, I don't know.
So Senator Khan has an to pass motion out there, correct? Did anyone second that?
Yes.
Senator Ward,
I
you seconded it?
Yeah.
All right, so we want to vote on that? Your out to pass motion?
Respectfully, Senator, I think Senator Hennessy was noting that based on the debate, discussion that just occurred, there needs to be an amendment if this ought to pass is moving forward. I can't, I don't know what the intentions are of the members, but I think that's what she,
All right, I'm going to withdraw my motion ought to pass and propose interim, I move interim study.
I'll second that motion. My microphone's on.
Okay,
Yeah,
the
but-
motion is interim study. All those in favor?
I, you know,
Opposed, no.
No. Opposed.
so that's 3-2, is that correct, Senator Ward?
Yep.
I'm just lost of where we are, to be quite honest. So 3-2.
Mm-hmm.
Who, Senator Rishardi and Senator Hennessy are the noes?
And I'm the no.
What was
So
that?
then it's 2-3.
That's why I'm confused.
And I'm going to come up with an amendment to revert for,
So we need another motion because that motion failed then.
So, Madam Chair, For the interim.
It's late.
It is, it surely is. So the interim study motion, who voted yes? Can you raise your hands for me? 2 people voted yes. Can you raise your hands of who voted no? There's 3 that voted no. So the interim study is defeated. So now we need a new motion from anybody on the committee.
What do you want us to vote on now?
There is nothing to vote on. So the motion of interim study was defeated. Now the floor is open for any new motions.
I move adjourn.
Executive session? I'll second that.
So I mean,
Okay, let's just leave it. I'll move all my motions in here, and then we'll think about it, but I will make an amendment for this one. And
okay.
I will have an amendment that will revert back to the original bill.
So you're saying you don't want to act on this today, is what you're saying?
I would love to do it if everybody's ready for it. And I don't even have to introduce but we have the bill as it is, the original bill as introduced. That will be the amendment that I will present.
I'm sorry. So are you motioning ought to pass, and then are you implying you want to do a floor amendment, or are you saying you want to do a committee amendment?
I think probably, I'd like to do a committee amendment to have it taken care of.
So what we are voting on, if a member were to make a motion, it would be on the as amended version that was brought to the committee. So if somebody motions ought to pass, it would be on the as amended version that passed the House. And then if someone were to move a committee amendment, of which you wanted to draft an amendment that was basically the as introduced version of the bill, that's. I can't see what you're showing me, I'm sorry.
It's the original version of the bill.
Okay, so that would be the amendment. So you'd
That
be,
will be the amendment.
okay. A lot of people are looking at me right now, and I'm not sure.
Do we need to do this today?
No, I'd be amendment to just close everything, but that's my plan.
Okay. I do want to say that I feel as if we've been asking for the financial information for special education for a while. I think we've gotten a few answers, but I don't think they've been the right answers. Maybe they have, I just haven't seen them, and I apologize, I get a lot of emails, but perhaps the information can come through you, Ava, that what we're looking for is, especially if we change the wording to inclusive, how many kids would this be, students would this be? Because if we end up passing that, the finance committee is gonna need to take a look at it. And to Representative Senator Khan's point, this is a financial impact to our districts. And if they're supportive of it, that's great, but if not, it might be.
So just to clarify, Senator, who are you wanting me to direct this question? The question being, how many students, if we change the language to be 21 inclusive or 22 inclusive? If we change the language to read 21 inclusive, your question for, I'm assuming the department, would be how many students would this,
What is the exact financial cost? And I know that they need to estimate it, because it's not the same for every kid, but you could get an estimated cost for residential placement kids, and you could get an estimated cost for in-district kids. There's 2 different ranges of costs that it would be.
I have a note that there are 79 students in New Hampshire.
There are 79 students in New Hampshire.
79 students that this applies to.
But it applies to the way it's currently written, or the way it would be amended written? So that's my question. How many kids, estimated cost?
and who would you like me to ask this question of?
Whoever can answer the.
Okay, okay.
And when they answer the question, there are 2 different ways to answer it. No, and this is real. It's either to the point that they turn 22 or doing the right thing and going through the end of the school year in which they turn 22, meaning completing their IEP. And furthermore, I'm going to guess that the average cost is around $100,000. And that if it, just, so that math's really simple. Take your pick between 40 and 80 students, and that's the downshift.
So Senator Khan, you're saying that there needs to be 2 points of clarification. One, on the cost, if we were to say at the point in which a student turns 22, or the cost associated with a student completing the school year in which they turn 22.
Right.
Got it.
Do I need to rescind any votes, earlier votes?
No,
We're
because
all
the interim
set?
study
Okay.
was
I'm
defeated.
looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move that we come out of executive session.
I second that. All those in favor? And then we can adjourn?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Thank you, ladies sitting over there. We have a lot of questions, you have a lot of answers.